Before the silence, there was a boy with a bright smile, a famous face, and a life millions believed they understood. But behind the spotlight, behind the sitcoms and teen magazines, Philip McKean was quietly carrying a weight no one could see. His story didn't begin with tragedy. It began, like many others, in a small town, with a dream and a camera. Philip McKean was born Philip Anthony McKean on November 11, 1964, in Westbury, New York, a quiet hamlet in Nassau County on Long Island. He was the son of Barbara McKean, a stay-at-home mother who later helped manage her children's early careers, and Donald McKean, a travel agent by profession. Philip grew up in a loving, tight-knit household that supported creativity and nurtured both his and his sister's early interests in the arts. His family life was rooted in modesty and discipline, values that proved invaluable as he transitioned into the fast-paced and often unpredictable world of show business. Philip shared a particularly close bond with his younger sister, Nancy McKean, who would also go on to become a successful actress in her own right. Known for her role as Jo Polniaczek on the hit 1980s sitcom The Facts of Life, the two siblings shared not only blood but a professional journey through the entertainment industry, one that would shape both of their lives in unique ways. Philip's professional career began astonishingly early, at the tender age of 4, when his parents, recognizing his photogenic charm and poise, began taking him to modeling auditions. It was initially a light-hearted decision. The family attended a local modeling audition not far from their home in Westbury, with both Philip and Nancy in tow. To their surprise, both children were noticed for their natural charisma, but it was Philip who first landed professional gigs. With his striking blue eyes, angelic features, and ease in front of the camera, he quickly found work as a print model. He began appearing in magazine ads, newspaper spreads, and national television commercials. This was the early 1970s, a golden era for advertising, and young Philip soon became a familiar face in countless American households, thanks to his appearances in popular commercial campaigns. As his modeling career flourished, so did opportunities in live performance and acting. Over the next several years, Philip expanded his talents beyond still photography and began appearing in theatrical stage productions, developing a strong sense of timing and performance that would serve him well in his future television work. Unlike many child actors who are thrust into the spotlight without preparation, Philip's background in modeling gave him valuable on-camera experience. It allowed for a smoother transition into the world of acting. His early exposure to the entertainment industry helped him grow up in the public eye, learning how to navigate the complexities of fame and professionalism from a young age. Interestingly, Philip's childhood wasn't entirely consumed by work. Like many boys his age, he loved sports, especially baseball. In fact, in 1975, he played Little League Baseball in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, the city famous for hosting the Little League World Series. During that time, he even played alongside Benoit Benjamin, who would later become an NBA player. This formative experience reminded everyone that, despite his rising fame, Philip remained grounded. He still enjoyed the simple joys of childhood and friendship, away from the studio lights. Philip's big break came on stage. One night, actress Linda Lavin, already a celebrated screen and stage performer, attended a Broadway production in which 12-year-old Philip was performing. At the time, Lavin was preparing to star in a new CBS sitcom called Alice, based on Martin Scorsese's 1974 film, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. She was immediately struck by Philip's talent, charisma, and ease on stage. So much so that she personally recommended him to the producers of Alice for the role of her on-screen son, Tommy Hyatt. She believed he would bring genuine warmth and spark to the character. Her endorsement changed everything. Philip auditioned and ultimately won the role, replacing child actor Alfred Lutter, who had played Tommy in the pilot. His casting was a perfect fit. Alice debuted on August 31, 1976, and became an instant hit. The sitcom ran for 9 seasons until March 19, 1985. During that time, Philip literally grew up before America's eyes, evolving from a precocious child into a thoughtful teen, navigating both scripted growing pains and real-life adolescence on a national stage. Thanks to his role on Alice, Philip McKeon became something of a teen idol. He was regularly featured in teen magazines and received fan mail from across the country. But he wasn't just a pretty face. Audiences and critics alike praised his comedic instincts and acting talent. He was nominated for the Young Artist Award in both 1981 and 1982, in the category of Best Young Actor in a Television Series, affirming that his skills were recognized by peers and industry insiders alike. Despite the fame and recognition, Philip later reflected on the challenges of being so closely associated with a single role. Like many child actors who found early success in sitcoms, he struggled with typecasting. After Alice ended, it became increasingly difficult to secure roles that would allow him to stretch his acting range. Casting directors often saw him only as Tommy Hyatt, a character America had grown up with, which made it harder for him to reinvent himself in the industry. Still, Philip remained grateful for his time on Alice. He often spoke about how the experience shaped his understanding of television production, not just as an actor, but as a future producer and director. He loved working with directors, understanding how sets operated, and being part of a tight-knit cast. That behind-the-scenes curiosity eventually led him to pivot toward a second career, one behind the camera. He stayed active in the industry throughout the late 1980s and 1990s, making guest appearances on iconic shows like Chips in 1979, where he brought youthful energy to a drama about California highway patrol officers. In 1984, he also appeared on Fantasy Island and The Love Boat, two beloved anthology-style series of the era that gave him space to explore different tones and characters. In 1988, Philip took on a more serious turn with Favorite Son, a political mini-series that showed his ability to handle complex and mature material. Around the same time, he started acting in feature films, including Leadfoot in 1982, where he played Tommy Russell in a made-for-TV drama. One of his most notable film roles came in 1987, when he appeared in Return to Horror High, a campy cult classic where he played Richard Farley. Though reviews were mixed, his performance was often remembered as a highlight. From there, Philip took roles in offbeat and genre films like Red Surf, 1989, 976 Evil 2, 1992, Sandman, 1993, and Ghoulies 4, 1995. These films weren't major box office hits, but they gave him the freedom to try new characters, often darker or more complex than his TV persona would have allowed. It was clear that he wanted to grow creatively, even if the mainstream industry wasn't watching as closely anymore. Eventually, Philip McKeon began shifting his focus behind the camera, a decision that would allow him to stay in the industry he loved, but on his own terms. With decades of experience in front of the lens, he brought a rare understanding to the roles of producer and director. His instincts were sharp, and his sense of storytelling, grounded in lived experience, gave him a unique voice behind the scenes. In 1992, he served as second assistant director and co-producer for the film Where the Day Takes You. The gritty drama followed the lives of homeless youth in Los Angeles and was praised for its realism and emotional impact. The film received strong critical reviews and helped establish Philip as a thoughtful and capable creative force behind the camera. He continued sharpening his production skills on films like Sandman, 1993, and The Young Unknowns, 2000. Then, in 2003, he made his directorial debut with Edge of Nowhere, a film praised for its introspective tone, careful direction, and emotional storytelling. Philip's producing credits also included a handful of unexpected successes. He worked on Teresa's Tattoo, 1994, a quirky crime comedy, Murder in the First, 1995, a heavy legal drama starring Kevin Bacon, and The Jacket, 2005, a psychological thriller that featured Adrian Brody and Keira Knightley. These films spanned genres, from experimental to hard-hitting, and showcased Philip's range as a filmmaker who could spot stories worth telling. Over time, however, his name stopped appearing in major credits. By the late 2000s, many began to wonder whether he had quietly retired or simply stepped back from the public eye. Philip, who had attended a private school in Burbank, California, reportedly St. John Paul II STEM Academy, was known for being introspective, private, and modest. And for those who remembered him from his Alice days, his graceful transition into a quieter creative life seemed fitting. Even into adulthood, Philip maintained his boy-next-door appeal. Standing at an impressive 6'3", with dark brown hair and striking blue eyes, he had a commanding yet kind presence. Fans who had watched him grow up noted how he transitioned from a cute child star into a tall, refined adult with classic Hollywood features. His looks remained part of his public image, but what truly endured was his integrity, his talent, and his quiet resilience. As the years passed, Philip McKean's personal life became the subject of speculation, particularly around his sexuality. Despite his good looks, charm, and visibility in the public eye, he never married. He lived a quiet, private life in a beautiful home, and for some, that was enough to raise questions. Rumors circulated for years that Philip McKean might have been gay. He never publicly addressed these claims. Questions like, who is Philip McKean's wife? Or, was Philip McKean ever in a relationship? Were asked frequently online and in fan circles. But the truth was, he remained single until his death, and he never disclosed any information about his romantic life or sexual orientation. Some believed that his silence was confirmation. Others believed he simply valued privacy in a world that often demanded personal confessions. It's important to note, Philip McKean was never involved in any scandal or controversy. He was known as kind, professional, and deeply private. The rumors about his sexuality persisted, in part because he didn't fit Hollywood's typical mold. But choosing not to marry or not to speak about one's personal life does not define someone's truth. And that was perhaps the most misunderstood part of Philip's story. In a culture quick to label, he remained quietly undefined. Though he gradually stepped away from the public eye, he was never forgotten. His fans from the Alice era continued to follow him with affection, and his work in production circles remained respected. He wasn't chasing stardom anymore. He was simply living life on his own terms. But that doesn't mean the years were easy. In a stunning revelation that left friends, fans, and the entertainment world in shock, it was discovered that Philip McKean had left behind a deeply personal and emotional note before his passing. The contents of that letter, described by those close to the family as shocking, heartbreaking, and illuminating, offered an intimate glimpse into a quiet struggle that had lasted decades, a struggle no one truly saw coming. In his final words, Philip opened up about his long battle with anxiety and depression. A battle he said had started in his teenage years, just as the world began watching him grow up on screen. He wrote that the pressure of early fame, the demands to always smile, always perform, and always live up to the image of Tommy Hyatt, slowly wore him down. He confessed to feeling like the industry that once embraced him had no room for him as an adult. There were moments of loneliness, long stretches of silence, the pain of being forgotten, while still remembered for only one thing. But it wasn't just about fame. Philip's letter touched on deeper wounds, the kind that come from comparisons. He expressed enormous love for his sister, Nancy McKean, calling her his anchor and light. But he also admitted how difficult it had been to live in the shadow of her continued success. Despite their close bond, he struggled with feelings of guilt, unworthiness, and the internal pressure to match what the world saw in her. And even though she never judged him, he admitted that he often judged himself. The letter also tackled the broader stigmas around mental health, especially among men and especially in Hollywood. "I spent so long pretending I was okay," he wrote, "because I didn't want to disappoint anyone, because I thought if I showed how broken I was, people would turn away." Perhaps the most haunting part of the letter was not what it said, but how honestly it said it. There was no blame, no resentment, Just pain, quiet, patient, and deeply human. And there was one more line. A line many now remember as a call to action. We need to stop pretending that smiles on screen mean someone is okay behind the scenes. For those who loved him, and for those who only knew him through a television screen, the note became more than just a goodbye. It became a legacy of honesty, of quiet courage, of a man who grew up under the spotlight, but carried his pain in the shadows. Philip McKeon died in Texas on December 10, 2019, at the age of 55 after a long illness. His family did not disclose the specific cause of death, and in many ways, that decision echoed the way he had lived. Private, respectful, and dignified. But even in death, Philip left behind something meaningful, a message that continues to resonate. His story has since sparked conversations about child stardom, mental health in Hollywood, and the emotional toll of fame that rarely gets acknowledged. He wasn't a tabloid headline. He wasn't a controversy. He was a kind soul who made people laugh, and who quietly asked the world to look a little deeper. Through his acting, his directing, and ultimately, through his final words, Philip McKeon reminded us that visibility does not equal invincibility. That being known is not the same as being understood, and that sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is tell the truth about their pain. He was more than a child star. He was a brother, an artist, and a voice for those who suffer in silence. And now his silence is finally being heard. In the years since his passing, Philip McKeon's story has taken on a new kind of relevance, not just as a cautionary tale about the cost of child stardom, but as a deeply personal reminder of the emotional depth behind the smiling faces we see on our screens. He wasn't just a name in the credits, he was a symbol of the silent battles so many face behind closed doors. Today, his letter is often quoted in mental health awareness campaigns, shared by advocates, therapists, and even fellow actors who grew up in the same system. His words, "We need to stop pretending that smiles on screen means someone is okay behind the scenes," have become a rallying cry in the push for emotional transparency in Hollywood. What was once a goodbye has now become a beginning, a spark that continues to light the way for conversations long overdue. In quiet moments, fans still revisit his work on Alice, sharing clips and memories online with captions like, "He was my first TV crush," or "Tommy felt like my big brother." And though many years have passed, the warmth Philip brought to that role, and to every role, still resonates. His performances were never flashy. They were honest, grounded, real, and perhaps that's why he stayed in the hearts of viewers long after the cameras stopped rolling. Behind the scenes, those who worked with him speak of a man who was thoughtful, curious, and always kind. He wasn't chasing the next big gig. He was the kind of person who asked how your day was and genuinely cared about the answer. That rare mix of heart and humility is what made him beloved not just as an actor, but as a human being. Nancy McKeon, his sister and lifelong friend, has remained mostly silent about his death, a silence many believe speaks to the depth of her grief. But those close to her say she's been quietly honoring his legacy in private ways, donating to mental health charities, attending small, anonymous events, making sure that the boy who once stood beside her in casting calls is never forgotten. As Hollywood begins to reckon with its treatment of young stars, from pressures around image to the isolation of early fame, Philip's story stands as a case study in empathy, not in scandal, not in drama, but in humanity. His life, and the note he left behind, offer a blueprint for how we can do better. Better as fans, by not demanding every personal detail from the people we admire. Better as an industry, by creating safer spaces for young performers to grow and evolve. And better as a society, by listening when someone says they're not okay, even if they seem like they have it all. Philip McKeon never shouted for attention. He didn't chase controversy or headlines. But in the end, he did something far more powerful. He told the truth, not for applause, but for connection. And in doing so, he gave others permission to speak their truth too. He reminded us that even in a world addicted to perfection, there is beauty in brokenness. that sometimes the brightest stars are the ones carrying the heaviest burdens, and that healing starts not with answers, but with the courage to ask hard questions. So today, when we look back on his life, let's not just remember the sitcom reruns or magazine covers. Let's remember the full story, the joy and the pain, the laughter and the silence, the young boy who lit up the screen, and the grown man who in the end gave the world something even more powerful, his truth. Because if there's one lesson Philip McKeon leaves us with, it's this: it's okay to be known. It's even braver to be understood. But the real magic? That happens when you're finally heard. He didn't leave behind a blockbuster or a tabloid scandal. He left something far more powerful, a truth spoken softly and finally. Philip McKeon's story isn't just about fame. It's about the weight of silence, the courage to feel, and the legacy of a life that mattered, even when it slipped out of the spotlight. If his journey moved you, take a moment to like, comment, and share this video. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear that they're not alone. And don't forget to subscribe to LGBTQ+ Vibes for more untold stories that deserve to be heard. Behind every smile, there's a story. Let's keep telling them. He made the world laugh for nearly a century. But behind Bob Hope's flawless timing, patriotic charm, and ever-present golf club was a truth he never dared to tell. While America crowned him a national treasure, Hollywood whispered about the parts of him he kept hidden, especially the names, the relationships, and the rumors he carried with him to the grave. This isn't just a story of fame, it's a story of fear, of sacrifice, and of the secret lives built behind the brightest spotlights. Today, we pull back the curtain on a man who made history while hiding from it. Bob Hope was born Leslie Towns Hope on May 29, 1903, in Eltham, London, England. His journey from humble beginnings to global stardom is a testament to his relentless work ethic, exceptional comedic talent, and unwavering commitment to bringing joy to others. Though born in England, he immigrated to the United States with his family at the age of 4. They settled in Cleveland, Ohio, where young Bob was raised. His early life was marked by hardship, as his family struggled financially. Yet even in those lean years, Hope exhibited a sharp wit and a gift for mimicry that would eventually catapult him into the spotlight. Hope's career began in the world of vaudeville, a popular theatrical variety entertainment format of the early 20th century. It was there that he honed his skills in timing, improvisation, and audience interaction. His early performances often included singing, dancing, and comedy, a combination that would become a trademark throughout his life. As vaudeville began to wane, Hope transitioned seamlessly into radio, where his clever banter and signature quick one-liners earned him widespread recognition. In 1938, he launched The Pepsodent Show, which aired on NBC and made him a household name across America. Hope's film career flourished during Hollywood's golden age. He starred in over 70 feature films, including his most iconic works in the Road to Film series, alongside crooner Bing Crosby and actress Dorothy Lamour. The series began with Road to Singapore in 1940 and became a cultural phenomenon, mixing exotic locations with slapstick humor and musical numbers. His comedic chemistry with Crosby was unmatched, and together, they created a formula that Hollywood attempted to replicate for years. Other memorable films include The Paleface, 1948, My Favorite Brunette, 1947, and The Lemon Drop Kid, 1951. Hope's ability to blend lighthearted self-deprecating, razor-sharp delivery made him a unique and enduring presence on the silver screen. But perhaps Bob Hope's most enduring legacy stems from his tireless work entertaining American troops, beginning during World War II and continuing through Korea, Vietnam, the Persian Gulf War, and even into his later years. Hope made it a personal mission to perform for United States military personnel stationed around the globe. His USO, United Service Organizations, tours became legendary. He made 57 tours over nearly 5 decades, often traveling to remote and dangerous war zones, simply to bring comfort, laughter, and a touch of home to those serving abroad. Hope's Christmas shows, broadcast to troops and families alike, were filled with music, comedy, and glamour. He was affectionately known as the GI's best friend, and to many service members, his presence meant the world. In recognition of his exceptional contributions to morale and public service, Bob Hope received numerous honors during his lifetime. He was awarded 5 honorary Academy Awards, including the prestigious Jean Hersholt Humanitarian Award in 1997. The United States Congress passed a resolution naming him an honorary veteran, the only civilian to receive such a title, a deeply symbolic gesture reflecting the profound respect he had earned among military ranks. He also received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the Congressional Gold Medal, and was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II in 1998, reflecting his influence on both sides of the Atlantic. Beyond his entertainment and humanitarian work, Bob Hope was a savvy businessman and philanthropist. He invested wisely in real estate and used his earnings to support a number of charitable causes, including hospitals, universities, and veterans organizations. His name graces institutions such as the Bob Hope Theater, the Bob Hope Airport in Burbank, California, and the Bob and Dolores Hope Foundation, which continues his legacy of giving and service. In 1933, Bob Hope married Grace Louise Troxell, a fellow performer and his partner in vaudeville. Their union came at a time when both were navigating the challenging and often unpredictable world of live stage performance. Grace was a striking and talented woman, known for her grace and presence on stage. Her partnership with Bob was as much professional as it was romantic. However, the pressures of a demanding career, constant touring, and the uncertain nature of show business began to place a strain on their relationship. The young couple's marriage was short-lived, and they found themselves drifting apart. Incompatibilities and career ambitions that pulled them in different directions ultimately led to their divorce in 1934, just a year after they had wed. Although their relationship ended quickly, it marked an important chapter in Bob Hope's early personal and professional development, offering him insights into the complexities of balancing love and career in the public eye. Later in 1934, Bob Hope's life changed forever when he met and married Dolores Reed, a talented nightclub singer with a warm, mellifluous voice and a charismatic stage presence. Dolores, born Dolores Stefina, was of Italian-American descent and was building a reputation of her own when she crossed paths with Bob. The couple's connection was instant and enduring. Dolores not only complemented Bob's dynamic personality with her own elegance and strength, but she also brought stability and loyalty into his life, qualities that would prove essential over the course of his long and storied career. Together, Bob and Dolores would go on to build a family through adoption, welcoming 4 children into their home: Linda, Anthony, Kelly, and Eleonora. Despite the demands of Bob's ever-growing fame and frequent absences due to touring, movie roles, and later USO performances entertaining troops across the globe, Dolores remained a steadfast partner and anchor at home. Their marriage, which lasted nearly 70 years, became one of the most enduring unions in the history of Hollywood. Dolores supported Bob not only as a wife, but also as a trusted confidant, quietly guiding and supporting his philanthropic endeavors and public service work behind the scenes. She often accompanied him on overseas USO tours, meeting with servicemen and women, and adding a touch of maternal warmth and musical grace to their morale-boosting efforts. Their shared commitment to helping others and their mutual respect became a cornerstone of their legacy. Throughout the decades, Bob Hope often credited Dolores with being the bedrock of his personal life, a woman of immense patience, humor, and faith. He would affectionately mention her in his routines and interviews, sometimes poking gentle fun at their long marriage, but always underscoring his deep love and appreciation for her. Even in his later years, as his health declined, Dolores remained by his side, caring for him with dignity and devotion. Their love story stood the test of time, weathering the shifting tides of fame, world events, and personal challenges. They remained together until Bob's passing in 2003, at the remarkable age of 100, leaving behind not only a rich legacy in the world of entertainment, but also a powerful example of enduring love and commitment in the often turbulent world of show business. Bob Hope, the legendary comedian and entertainer whose career spanned vaudeville, radio, film, and television, was more than just a fixture of American entertainment. He was also a sharp observer of Hollywood's golden age. Behind his ever-present golf club and his reputation for quick-witted banter, Hope carried with him a deep knowledge of the entertainment industry and its stars. Over the years, particularly in his later life, Hope occasionally offered behind-the-scenes reflections about the people he had worked with, many of whom lived double lives, hiding their true identities, in an era that was intolerant of anything deemed non-traditional. In private conversations and memoir-style interviews, Hope acknowledged the immense pressures faced by gay actors during Hollywood's studio era, particularly in the 1930s through the 1950s. During this time, being openly gay could end a career overnight. Studios wielded enormous power over their stars, crafting their public personas, and often going to great lengths to conceal anything that might be seen as controversial. Hope, who mingled with everyone from Clark Gable to Cary Grant, understood the coded language, the secret relationships, and the complex private lives that lay behind the glamorous facade. Although he was a conservative public figure in many ways, Bob Hope also had a pragmatic, almost sympathetic view of his closeted colleagues. He once joked that he had been around the block in Hollywood long enough to know who was playing it straight on screen, but living another kind of truth in real life. According to several Hollywood historians, Hope could rattle off a list of actors who, while projecting hyper-masculine or romantic personas on camera, were privately homosexual. These included major stars such as Rock Hudson, whose sexual orientation was a closely guarded secret until shortly before his death from AIDS in 1985. Hudson, like many others, entered into studio-arranged relationships with women to uphold the illusion of heterosexuality, a practice known as lavender marriages. Hope reportedly mentioned other well-known names as well, such as Raymond Burr, who starred in Perry Mason and Ironside, and whose long-term relationship with a male partner was hidden from the public for decades. There was also Tab Hunter, a teen heartthrob whose sexuality was kept under wraps by Warner Brothers, and who only came out publicly in his 2005 memoir. Hope, whose comedic work often poked fun at gender roles and societal norms, seemed aware of the ironies and tragedies in the lives of these men. Actors who brought joy to millions while enduring emotional and psychological stress behind closed doors. Even actors whose sexuality was more ambiguous or subject to rumor, like Montgomery Clift, Anthony Perkins, or even James Dean, were mentioned in hushed tones by insiders. Hope, who spent decades performing for the troops and hosting the Academy Awards, moved in circles where such whispers were common knowledge. Yet even he admitted that discretion was not just polite, it was necessary. The fear of scandal, blackmail, or loss of livelihood kept many actors from living openly. Hope reportedly expressed both admiration for their courage and sadness at the sacrifices they made. Bob Hope, the legendary entertainer whose career spanned vaudeville, radio, film, and television, passed away after a long, painful struggle, marked not just by physical decline, but by a lifelong battle to keep certain aspects of his private life carefully shielded from the public eye. Behind the trademark grin and quick-witted charm that endeared him to millions, Hope grappled with the challenge of maintaining an image that was very much a product of Hollywood's golden age. a time when the pressures to conform to societal norms and studio-imposed identities were intense and unforgiving. Among the whispers and rumors that followed him was the suggestion of a dated gay actor's secret, an allusion to the fact that many stars of his era, forced by the Hollywood studio system and societal conventions, concealed their true sexual identities to protect their careers and personal lives. For Hope, this meant navigating a complex web of public persona and private reality, often at great emotional and psychological cost. Throughout his prolific career, Bob Hope was famous not only for his comedic timing and vaudeville flair, but also for his incredible ability to connect with a diverse spectrum of Hollywood's elite. He moved effortlessly among the legends of the silver screen, mingling with icons such as Clark Gable, whose rugged masculinity and status as the King of Hollywood set the standard for leading men, and Cary Grant, the epitome of charm, sophistication, and debonair elegance. These relationships were more than mere social acquaintances. They were part of a tightly knit network of stars who often supported one another in an industry rife with scrutiny and gossip. Hope's ability to maintain these connections was a testament to his diplomatic skill and charisma. He was known for his warm, approachable nature, a man who could lighten the mood with a quick joke or a well-timed quip. Yet, he was also deeply aware of the delicate balance required to survive in Hollywood's spotlight. His interactions with figures like Gable and Grant were shaped by mutual respect and an unspoken understanding of the pressures they each faced. Pressures to embody ideals both on and off screen, and to suppress anything that might jeopardize their carefully crafted images. However, as the decades passed, and societal attitudes slowly began to shift, the burdens of secrecy weighed heavier on Hope. The dated aspect of his secret underscores the generational and cultural context in which he lived, an era when homosexuality was not only stigmatized, but often considered career suicide for any actor in the public eye. Unlike some of his contemporaries, who quietly accepted or revealed their identities later in life, Hope remained resolutely private, continuing to guard his personal truth behind a facade of joviality and patriotism, never letting the world see the vulnerabilities beneath. His death marked the end of an era, not only of his own extraordinary life, but also of a Hollywood culture that demanded silence and conformity, at great cost to those trapped within it. The painful struggle he endured, both physically and emotionally, serves as a poignant reminder of the sacrifices made by countless entertainers, whose true selves were hidden to protect their place in the spotlight. Bob Hope's legacy, therefore, is twofold: a celebration of his immense contributions to entertainment and charity, and a solemn acknowledgement of the personal battles he faced in a world that was often unforgiving to those who did not fit its narrow molds. On the morning of July 27, 2003, the world bid farewell to one of its most iconic entertainers. When Bob Hope passed away at the age of 100, he died peacefully from pneumonia at his longtime residence in Toluca Lake, California, a quiet, upscale neighborhood in Los Angeles that had been his home for decades. Surrounded by family members, his passing marked the end of an era in American entertainment. Hope's death drew widespread attention, not only because of his century-long life, but also due to the incredible impact he had made across multiple generations as a comedian, actor, singer, dancer, and humanitarian. One of the most touching stories to emerge in the days following his death came from Zach Hope, Bob Hope's grandson. In a televised interview with journalist Soledad O'Brien, Zach recounted a moment that illustrated the entertainer's enduring wit and charm, even in his final hours. When Dolores, his beloved wife of nearly 70 years, tenderly asked him on his deathbed where he would like to be buried, Bob is said to have smiled and replied simply, "Surprise me." The quip, filled with Hope's signature humor and lightheartedness, became a widely circulated anecdote that reflected the very essence of his personality, a man who used laughter to navigate even the most profound moments of life. Following his passing, Bob Hope's remains were initially placed in a temporary mausoleum vault at the San Fernando Mission Cemetery, a historic burial site located in the Mission Hills area of Los Angeles. However, plans were soon underway to create a permanent memorial befitting his legacy. In the years that followed, the Bob Hope Memorial Garden was constructed adjacent to the cemetery, on the grounds of the San Fernando Mission, one of California's original 21 Spanish missions, founded in the late 18th century. The garden, meticulously designed and landscaped, now serves as the final resting place for Bob Hope, and later, his wife Dolores. It is a serene and respectful tribute to a man who brought joy to millions, featuring lush greenery, peaceful walkways, and plaques commemorating his life and service. Dolores Hope, a formidable woman in her own right, outlived her husband by 8 years. A singer, philanthropist, and constant presence at Bob's side throughout his career. Dolores passed away in 2011 at the remarkable age of 102. The enduring strength of their marriage, lasting nearly 7 decades, was legendary in the entertainment world. Dolores played an essential role in supporting Bob's numerous charity endeavors and USO tours, often accompanying him to entertain American troops stationed overseas. In the days and weeks following Bob Hope's death, tributes poured in from around the world, reflecting the deep affection people felt for him. One of the most moving forms of homage came from newspaper cartoonists, who paid their respects in ink across the globe. Many of these editorial cartoons poignantly illustrated Hope's arrival in heaven, often depicting Bing Crosby, his longtime friend and collaborator, welcoming him with open arms. Crosby, who had died in 1977, had shared the screen with Hope in the popular Road to film series, and their dynamic camaraderie and on-screen chemistry had become legendary. The images of the two reunited in the afterlife captured the hearts of fans, evoking both laughter and tears. Bob Hope's death marked the end of a chapter in American culture. He was more than just a performer. He was a symbol of humor, patriotism, and resilience. His legacy continues to live on through the countless films, television specials, and USO tours that defined his career, as well as in the memorial garden that honors his life. A quiet and fitting resting place for a man who once said, "I've always been in the right place at the right time. Of course, I steered myself there." Bob Hope's story is bigger than awards, applause, and carefully crafted punchlines. It's a mirror held up to an era that silenced difference and demanded performers play roles even off the screen. In the end, Hope was more than a comedian. He was a survivor of Hollywood's golden lie. If this story opened your eyes or touched your heart, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more hidden histories. Because behind every icon, there's always a truth waiting to be told. What if coming out meant losing everything, but doing it anyway? What if love wasn't just private, but political? In this video, we uncover 30 LGBTQ+ icons who didn't just live their truth, they turned it into a revolution. From Hollywood's golden age to Gen Z trailblazers, these stars risked it all to be seen. Some were erased, some fought back. All of them changed the game. Stay with us because these aren't just stories, they're battles, and you need to know who won. Subscribe to LGBTQ+ Vibes and drop a in the comments if one of these stories moves you. Martina Navratilova. Born behind the Iron Curtain in Czechoslovakia, Martina Navratilova was never meant to play it safe. Her journey to greatness began with a quiet act of defiance, leaving her homeland in search of freedom. It wasn't just about tennis, it was about owning her life. Armed with a racket and relentless drive, Martina made her way to the United States, chasing something bigger than trophies. And she didn't just win, she dominated. 18 Grand Slam singles titles, 332 weeks ranked world No. 1. Her presence on the court was electric, her game revolutionary. But the real story? It started when the crowd stopped clapping. In 1981, Martina did something most athletes in her position were terrified to do. She came out, not to score points, not for applause, but because she couldn't lie anymore. At a time when being gay could end your career, she stood up, said it out loud, and watched the endorsements disappear. The headlines twisted her truth. The sponsors bailed, some fans walked away. But Martina, she kept playing, kept winning, and slowly the world had no choice but to respect her, not just as an athlete, but as a woman brave enough to be seen. Her courage cracked the glass walls around sports and identity, opening space for others who felt invisible. Years after leaving professional tennis, Martina never left the fight. She became a bold, unfiltered voice for LGBTQ+ rights, for women in sports, for truth in the face of power. She wasn't always polite. She didn't need to be. She was clear. She was fierce. And through every battle she chose to take on, from the tennis court to political arenas, she reminded the world, visibility matters. Because when Martina Navratilova spoke, the world listened, not because she was perfect, but because she was honest. And that made her more than a champion. It made her unforgettable. In the world of beauty pageants and high fashion, Julia Lemagova was every bit the image of perfection. Crowned Miss USSR in 1990, she stood tall with poise, grace, and a magnetic allure that captivated Europe. But what the cameras never caught was the silence she carried. Behind the sparkle of gowns and the flash of cameras, Julia hid the most essential part of herself. For years, she played the role that was expected of her: model, socialite, ideal woman in the eyes of a rigid world. But even under the brightest lights, she couldn't escape the feeling that something real, something honest, was waiting. It wasn't until she met Martina Navratilova that the silence began to break. Their connection was undeniable. Two women from different worlds, both shaped by resistance, both familiar with exile. Julia didn't just fall in love, she stepped into truth. When the couple went public, it sent ripples through elite circles. This wasn't just tabloid fodder, it was revolution in heels. A former Soviet beauty queen now proudly walking hand in hand with a tennis legend. The world hadn't seen that before. And yet Julia embraced the storm with grace. Her love wasn't loud, but it was unwavering. Today, Julia Lemagova is more than a former model. She's a wife, a mother, and a voice for visibility. As the first openly gay cast member of The Real Housewives of Miami, she brought authenticity to a franchise built on fantasy. But she never pretended. She shared her story, raw, elegant, and deeply human. From beauty queen to queer icon, Julia's journey wasn't scripted, it was earned. And through it all, she's shown that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks quietly into the light and simply says, "This is me." Long before the red carpets and perfume empires, Marc Jacobs was just a kid from New York, sketching dreams in the margins of his notebooks. Raised by his grandmother after a turbulent childhood, he found safety in the world of fabric and imagination. While others were trying to fit in, Marc was busy creating something new, something bold. He wasn't loud, he wasn't a rebel in the classic sense, but his art, it spoke for him. And it didn't whisper, it screamed. By his early 20s, he was already turning heads in the fashion world. And not long after, he became the name Marc Jacobs, the one stitched into luxury, controversy, and raw innovation. But fashion wasn't the only line he refused to color inside. Marc came out as gay early in his career, when the industry was far more polished than proud. He didn't do it to make a statement, he just didn't know how to be anyone else. With every runway show, with every daring campaign, he pushed culture forward, quietly queering luxury, making space for the outsiders, the misunderstood, the beautiful misfits. He blurred lines between art and commerce, gender and glamour. While other designers built brands, Marc built a mirror and dared society to look into it. Today, Marc Jacobs isn't just a designer. He's a survivor of addiction, of heartbreak, of reinvention. His openness about rehab, plastic surgery, love, sex, and self-worth has made him more than an icon. It's made him real. Whether he's posting shirtless selfies at 60 or marrying the man he loves in a kilt and glitter boots, Mark is still doing what he's always done best, being unapologetically himself. In a world that profits off of trends, Marc Jacobs has always been the original, imperfect, unfiltered, and absolutely unforgettable. Some stars burn bright for a moment. Elton John? He lit up the sky for decades. From the moment his fingers first touched piano keys, the music wasn't just notes, it was fire. Born Reginald Dwight in a modest British home, he didn't fit the world around him, so he built a new one. With oversized glasses, sequined suits, and unmatched melodies, he created a universe where feeling too much was finally allowed. Songs like Rocket Man, Tiny Dancer, and Your Song didn't just climb the charts, they wrapped themselves around people's hearts, made them feel seen, understood, less alone. But fame didn't soften the pain. Behind the feathers and flashing lights was a man at war with himself. Elton came out as bisexual in the 1970s, then later as gay. But it wasn't simple. The music world cheered the icon but ignored the man. He battled addiction, loneliness, self-doubt. There were nights the spotlight felt colder than the silence that followed. Yet he never stopped playing, never stopped writing. And somehow, in the chaos of celebrity, he found the courage to rebuild. From rehab to rebirth, from headlines to healing. Then came the love story. When Elton married David Furnish, it wasn't just a wedding, it was history. Two men openly in love, building a family, raising children, showing the world what queer joy looks like when it's real. And unashamed. Beyond the Grammys, beyond the global tours, Elton's legacy became something greater. He started the Elton John AIDS Foundation, raising hundreds of millions. He used his voice not just to sing, but to save lives. And through every high and every heartbreak, one truth remained. Elton John didn't just survive the industry, he changed it. With a piano, a truth, and a whole lot of glitter. He was the voice of a generation, smooth, soulful, and unmistakably his own. George Michael wasn't just a pop star, he was poetry in motion, dressed in leather jackets and heartbreak. From his early days in Wham, he lit up the charts with bubblegum joy, but behind the smile was a young man searching for meaning and for himself. As the 80s turned electric, George stepped into the spotlight as a solo artist and exploded. Faith, Father Figure, One More Try, these weren't just hits, they were confessions. And they turned him into a global icon. But not even fame could drown out the secret he was forced to carry. For years, George lived in the shadows of his own truth. The industry loved his voice, but feared his identity. So he let the music speak, layered with longing, pulsing with desire, always just a little out of reach. He came out publicly only after being forced to, after a highly publicized arrest in 1998. But instead of shame, George chose defiance. He took the moment back, made it art, made it honest, and in doing so, became something greater than a pop star. He became a symbol, not of scandal but of survival, of finally owning what the world tried to hide. Even as the world changed around him, George Michael stayed true to who he was, flawed, open, and unfiltered. He gave millions to charity, often in secret. He supported LGBTQ+ causes long before they were trending. But fame had its weight, and over time it wore him down. When he passed in 2016, the world didn't just lose a voice, it lost a soul. A man who had given so much, asked for so little, and still felt the sting of being misunderstood. But in the end, his legacy is clear. George Michael didn't need a stage to matter. His truth was the melody, and it plays on. He wasn't the loudest in the room, but when Mark Feely sang, you felt it. Deep, emotional, honest. As one of the lead vocalists of Westlife, he helped define the sound of a generation. Power ballads, broken hearts, and the kind of harmonies that made the world pause. While fans screamed for posters and frontmen, Mark quietly carried the weight of the melody. But even as his voice soared across stadiums, his truth stayed tucked away. For years, Mark lived a double life. On stage, he was every bit the pop star, clean-cut, charming, adored. But off stage, he was scared. Not of love, but of how the world might react to the kind he felt. In an industry that packaged boy bands as fantasies for teen girls, there wasn't space for a gay man to be real. So Mark kept quiet. Until one day, he didn't. In 2005, at the height of Westlife's fame, he came out. No big announcement, no scandal, just a quiet interview, and a world that suddenly saw him differently. But here's the thing, Mark didn't change. He didn't become the gay member. He remained the heart of Westlife, voice steady, presence strong. Over time, fans embraced him for who he truly was, and loved him even more. Today, he's a father, a partner, an artist who no longer needs to hide. And as Westlife continues their legacy, Mark stands as proof that pop music doesn't need perfection, it needs truth. Sometimes, the most powerful voices are the ones that took the longest to find their freedom. There was something different about Stephen Gately. You didn't have to know him to feel it. You just had to hear him sing. As one of the 5 voices of Boyzone, Stephen brought a sweetness that made the music feel safe, familiar, like home. While the rest of the world danced to boy bands built on swagger and flirtation, Stephen stood quietly with a smile that said more than any lyric could. But behind that gentle charm was a secret he carried alone, for far too long. In the late 90s, being gay in a boy band wasn't just risky, it was career suicide. Labels weren't interested in authenticity, they wanted fantasy. And in that fantasy, Stephen's truth had no place. So he kept it hidden, singing love songs that never quite fit. Until one day, in 1999, he chose himself. At just 23, Stephen Gately came out publicly, making him one of the first openly gay pop stars in a major boy band. The headlines were immediate. The pressure? Immense. But something rare happened. The fans stayed. They didn't turn away. They listened, and they loved him louder. Stephen's coming out didn't stop the music, it made it deeper. He went on to write, to act, to create with more honesty than ever before. And when he met Andrew Cowles, the man he would later marry, it wasn't a rebellion, it was peace. But just as the world was beginning to catch up to his courage, tragedy struck. In 2009, Stephen passed away suddenly at the age of 33. The news shook fans across the globe. It felt too soon, too unfair. But in his short life, Stephen Gately gave us something rare, an open heart, a fearless voice, and a legacy that reminds us, being true to yourself is the most beautiful song of all. She was America's sweetheart until she decided she didn't want to be. For years, Miley Cyrus wore the blonde wig of Hannah Montana and smiled for the Disney cameras. A perfect pop package. Cute, clean, controlled. But under all that glitter was a girl bursting at the seams. She wasn't built to stay inside the lines. She wasn't born to be safe. And when the curtain finally dropped, so did the act. What came next wasn't a scandal. It was a transformation. Miley didn't ease into adulthood. She exploded into it. Tongue out, shaved head, riding a wrecking ball like she had nothing left to lose. And maybe she didn't. She stripped down everything people thought they knew about her and rebuilt from the ground up. Louder, messier, realer. Along the way, she spoke about her sexuality with a kind of raw clarity. Pansexual, non-binary in energy, queer in spirit. Labels didn't matter to her, freedom did. And in a world obsessed with boxing people in, Miley kicked down the sides and lit the box on fire. But here's the twist. Under all that chaos was always control. Miley isn't just a rebel. She's an artist, a strategist, a soul who sees the beauty in contradiction. From country ballads to psychedelic rock to stripped-down covers that silence an entire room, she's never stayed in one lane and never apologized for it. Through every era, every reinvention, Miley has carried one message. There's power in owning who you are, even when it scares people. Especially when it scares people. Because for her, being Miley Cyrus has never been about fitting in, it's been about breaking free. She came from the small town of Gunnedah, Australia, a girl with freckles, bare feet, and big dreams. Before she became a household name, Miranda Kerr was raised by strong women, grounded in simplicity and self-belief. She didn't grow up around spotlights, but somehow she was born to walk into one. At just 13, she won a national modeling contest, and soon the fashion world came calling. But unlike many who rise fast and burn out, Miranda stayed centered. She became the first Australian Victoria's Secret angel, redefining beauty with her down-to-earth elegance. Behind every flawless photo was a woman who knew exactly who she was, even when the world didn't. While many saw only the glamorous covers and red carpet looks, Miranda was navigating a deeper understanding of herself. In interviews, she began opening up, slowly, honestly, about her experiences with women. She didn't slap a label on it. She didn't try to fit into a box. She simply spoke her truth. Fluidity, she explained, is part of love. For Miranda, queerness wasn't rebellion, it was reflection. A mirror she had looked into without fear. And though the industry rarely makes space for subtlety, she made space for herself. As a mother, a model, and now a wellness entrepreneur, Miranda built a career that wasn't based on noise, but on presence. Today, she runs a thriving skincare empire, nurtures a blended family, and continues to speak about self-care, authenticity, and conscious living. She's not chasing headlines or viral moments. She doesn't need to. Miranda Kerr's power is quiet but unwavering. She walks through the world not to impress it, but to inspire it. And perhaps that's the most radical thing of all, being exactly who you are, with grace, when the world expects you to perform. She was Hollywood royalty by birth, but that crown came with a curse. Drew Barrymore's first memory of fame wasn't glamour. It was chaos. At just 7 years old, she lit up the screen in E.T., capturing the world's heart. But while audiences cheered, Drew was already slipping into darkness. By the age of 13, she'd been in rehab, twice. By 15, she was emancipated from her parents. Most child stars fade by then. But Drew? She began again. Her comeback wasn't overnight, it was earned. She clawed her way back through grit, therapy, and sheer force of will. When she returned to Hollywood in the 90s, she didn't come back as the girl next door. She was wild, colorful, unfiltered, and she embraced it. Through iconic roles in The Wedding Singer, Never Been Kissed, and Charlie's Angels, she built a persona that celebrated messy women, girls who felt deeply and loved recklessly. Off-screen, Drew was just as raw. She spoke openly about her mental health, her addictions, her failures, and her sexuality. Identifying as bisexual, she never made it a headline stunt. She spoke with that same warmth and honesty that made people trust her, even when she was still learning to trust herself. Now, as the host of The Drew Barrymore Show, she brings that same transparency to daytime television. She cries with guests, she laughs too loud, she dances barefoot, and millions of viewers see themselves in her, imperfect, resilient, still trying. Drew never chased perfection, she chased realness. And in doing so, she's become something far more lasting than a star. She's become a mirror, a reminder that you can fall apart, stitch yourself back together, and still shine. Tig Notaro never planned to be famous. She didn't even plan to be funny. Her early years were filled with detours, high school dropout, odd jobs, late-night open mics. But when she stepped on stage with that dry, deadpan delivery, something clicked. She didn't tell jokes, she told stories, with pauses that stretched longer than punchlines. She was awkward, unapologetic, different, and that difference became her power. Tig wasn't chasing applause. She was inviting people into her world and daring them to stay. Then came 2012. In one surreal week, Tig lost her mother unexpectedly, went through a breakup, got diagnosed with bilateral breast cancer, and contracted a life-threatening infection. Most people would disappear. Tig stepped on stage. "Hello, I have cancer," she said. No punchline, no build-up, just truth. What followed was a set so raw, so vulnerable, that it became legend. Louis C.K. released it online, and suddenly Tig wasn't just a comic, she was a revelation. She didn't hide her scars. She made art out of them. After recovering and undergoing a double mastectomy, Tig continued to blaze her own trail. She starred in the semi-autobiographical series One Mississippi, married actress Stephanie Allen, and became a mother to twin boys. Through it all, she stayed true to her quiet brilliance. Tig doesn't do stand-up like anyone else. She lingers in the stillness, trusts the silence, and lets the audience come to her. In a world that rewards spectacle, she proves that honesty, plain, brave, beautiful honesty, is still the most radical thing on stage. Before anyone knew her name, Stephanie Allen was chasing laughter in the shadows of the mainstream. She cut her teeth in improv, performing at Upright Citizens Brigade, where comedy was raw, messy, and sometimes more honest than the news. She wasn't the loudest on stage, but she was the kind of funny that made people lean in. Subtle, smart, unexpected. Her roles in One Mississippi, In a World, and The L Word. Generation Q revealed what fans had known all along. Stephanie didn't just play characters, she gave them breath. Off-screen, her story took a beautifully unexpected turn. For most of her life, Stephanie had dated men. She never imagined falling in love with a woman. And then Tig Notaro walked into her life. The shift wasn't dramatic, it was quiet and undeniable. Stephanie didn't make a spectacle of it. She simply let love speak for itself. When the two got married in 2015, it wasn't just a wedding, it was a quiet revolution. A reminder that identity doesn't always follow a straight line, and that sometimes your heart finds home in the most unexpected place. Now a mother of twin boys, Stephanie balances comedy and chaos, scripts and school runs. She continues to write and act with the same grounded honesty that defines her life. She's not flashy, she doesn't need to be. Her power is in presence, in living fully, openly, and without apology. In a world obsessed with extremes, Stephanie Allen is a soft kind of brave, and that's exactly why she stands out. Born in London to South Asian parents, Shamim Sharif grew up straddling cultures that didn't always understand her. She knew early on that she was different, not just in her heritage, but in her heart. She was a young woman in love with storytelling and with other women. In a community where queerness was rarely discussed, she found her truth between pages, in the margins of what could be said. She became a writer not to escape, but to explain. And what she created was more than fiction. It was a mirror for those who had none. Her debut novel, The World Unseen, wasn't just a book, it was an act of defiance. Set in 1950s South Africa, it told the story of two Indian women who fall in love amid apartheid. Bold, political, queer, everything the world told her to avoid. But Shamim leaned in. She adapted it into a film, and then did the same with I Can't Think Straight, a story closer to her own life, inspired by her relationship with producer Hanan Katan. In an industry filled with gatekeepers, Shamim built her own door. Today, she continues to write and direct stories that center queer women of color, characters who are complex, fierce, and beautifully human. She doesn't beg for permission to be visible. She simply exists, authentically, unapologetically. Shamim Sharif is proof that words can be weapons, but also bridges, and that sometimes the boldest thing you can do is tell the truth with elegance. She doesn't stand in the spotlight, but she makes sure it's pointed at the right people. Hanan Katan is a producer, entrepreneur, and quiet force behind some of the most important queer films of the last 2 decades. Born in Jordan and raised in a conservative environment, she learned early that silence can feel like survival. But Hanan never settled for invisibility. When she met Shamim Sharif, everything changed. Not just her personal life, but her purpose. Together, they formed a creative and life partnership rooted in trust, storytelling, and revolution. Hanan produced The World Unseen, I Can't Think Straight, and Despite the Falling Snow, films that not only showcased queer love, but did so through a lens rarely seen in Western media. Queer, brown, female, and proud. She wasn't chasing box office numbers, she was chasing impact, and she found it. In packed film festivals, in private messages from women across the world who saw themselves for the first time. Outside of film, Hanan built a global wellness brand, balancing art and enterprise with grace. But her proudest role remains the one behind the scenes, holding space for stories that need telling and for a love that defied borders. She doesn't wear activism on her sleeve, but it pulses through everything she creates. In a world quick to overlook the quiet ones, Hanan Katan proves that power doesn't have to shout. Sometimes it simply shows up, does the work, and changes the world from backstage. He had the kind of face that made people stop. Sharp jawline, deep blue eyes, a smile that flickered between mischief and mystery. When Kyle XY hit TV screens in the mid-2000s, Matt Dallas became a teen idol overnight. Playing a genetically engineered boy with no belly button and no past, Matt embodied both innocence and intensity. But off-screen, his real life was far more complicated, because while he was playing a character searching for identity, he was quietly hiding his own. For years, rumors swirled, magazine covers speculated, blogs dissected his every move, and Matt said nothing. Hollywood had a way of making queerness feel like a threat, especially for leading men. He was advised to keep his private life quiet if he wanted to keep getting cast. And for a while he listened, but silence is heavy, and pretending takes its toll. In 2013, he broke the pattern. In one quiet Instagram post, Matt introduced the world to his husband, Blue Hamilton. No press tour, no headline-grabbing interview, just love, unapologetic and real. Since then, Matt has leaned into a life that feels more grounded than glamorous. He and Blue adopted a son, Crow, and opened their lives to fans with authenticity and warmth. He still acts, but fame isn't the goal anymore. Peace is, family is, truth is. And for an actor once known for playing a boy with no identity, Matt Dallas now stands as a man who knows exactly who he is and lives it every single day. To an entire generation, he'll always be Aaron Samuels, the guy with the perfect hair in Mean Girls. But Jonathan Bennett is so much more than a teen heartthrob frozen in 2004. Behind the scenes, he was navigating something that never made it into the script, a growing realization that he was different and the fear of what it might cost him. In Hollywood, charm is currency, and queerness, for years, was the kind of secret you were told to bury if you wanted to be bankable. So Jonathan played along, smiled on red carpets, dated women in public. But inside, he was waiting for a different kind of role, one that allowed him to be himself. When he finally came out publicly, it was as if the air shifted. The guy who once hid behind sitcom smiles was suddenly open, proud, and joyful. He didn't just come out, he stepped into the spotlight with purpose. From Hallmark holiday movies featuring same-sex couples to co-hosting Cake Wars, Jonathan carved out a space in mainstream media where queer joy could exist without apology. And it didn't stop there. In 2022, he married James Vaughn in a beachside ceremony that wasn't just beautiful, it was historic. The couple became one of the first gay male pairs to appear on the cover of The Knot, a major bridal magazine. Jonathan's story isn't one of rebellion. It's one of quiet revolution. He showed that you don't have to burn bridges to change the industry, you just have to light the way. James Vaughn was never content staying in one lane. He started as a singer, dazzled as a TV personality, and eventually found his voice, not just in entertainment, but in advocacy. Raised in Nevada, he came up through the pageant and performance circuit, developing a charm that was equal parts genuine and strategic. But beneath the polished smile was a man who knew what it felt like to be the other. As an openly gay contestant on The Amazing Race, he didn't just race for the prize, he raced for visibility. That visibility soon turned into impact. James became a staple on red carpets, co-hosting shows like Celebrity Page and The Talk. But what made him stand out wasn't just his looks or talent, it was how he used both. He talked openly about body image, masculinity, love, and vulnerability. Subjects many male hosts still tiptoe around. And when he met Jonathan Bennett, The two didn't just become a couple, they became a movement. Together, they launched Outbound Travel, a queer-focused travel company built on inclusivity, safety, and joy. Their wedding was featured in People in the Knot, sending a clear message to the world: gay love isn't niche. It's normal. It's beautiful. James Vaughn doesn't just show up for representation, he builds it. One stage, one story, one bold step at a time. He wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing feeling. Andrew Scott built his career quietly, far from the tabloid glare, far from the Hollywood flash. Born and raised in Dublin, Ireland, he found his calling early, on stage, in character, in control. Long before the world knew him as Moriarty from Sherlock or the hot priest from Fleabag, he was already captivating audiences in theater. There was something magnetic about him, subtle, dangerous, deeply human. His performances didn't just entertain, they exposed. But for years, Andrew lived with a truth he didn't share. Not out of shame, but exhaustion. The industry had a habit of labeling queer actors as niche, as if love or desire came with a limit. So he waited. And when he did come out, it wasn't with a press release, it was in a quiet, thoughtful interview where he simply said, mercifully, "Today it's not a big deal to be gay, but I think it's important to be honest." Just like that, no spectacle, just truth. Since then, Andrew has chosen roles that defy stereotypes. He plays lovers, villains, heroes, philosophers, never boxed in, never apologizing. He's earned critical acclaim, BAFTA wins, Emmy nominations, but his greatest power is how effortlessly he expands the narrative of what it means to be a gay man in film. He doesn't need rainbows or slogans, he just shows up, raw and real. And that, in itself, is radical. Michelle Rodriguez doesn't ask for your approval, she dares you to keep up. From the moment she punched her way into the spotlight in Girl Fight, Hollywood had never seen anyone quite like her. Tough, sexy, unfiltered. She wasn't the damsel in distress, she was the one driving the car, throwing the punch, making her own rules. Through The Fast and the Furious, Resident Evil, SW8, and beyond, she built a brand on badassery. But behind the leather jackets and grit was a woman who didn't quite fit the mold, on screen or off. For years, Michelle kept her personal life locked tight. She refused to play Hollywood's game of pretend. People whispered, rumors, and finally, she answered in her own way. In 2014, she told the world she had gone both ways, that she wasn't interested in fitting into a box. She wasn't coming out for attention, she was just tired of hiding. And that honesty hit hard, because if the toughest woman in action films could be queer, maybe the world was finally catching up. Since then, Michelle has remained as unpredictable as ever. She's still doing stunts most actors wouldn't attempt, still choosing roles that blur lines, still speaking out about diversity, justice, and identity in Hollywood. She's not trying to be a role model. She's just trying to be real. And in an industry that thrives on facades, Michelle Rodriguez remains refreshingly, powerfully herself. For a long time, she lived behind a mask. Known first as Lucas Balmaceda in the Chilean acting world, Lux Pascal was already a rising star before she ever shared her truth. But being seen isn't the same as being known. Inside, she was struggling, caught between public recognition and private pain. It wasn't about fame, it was about authenticity. And in 2021, she stepped fully into herself. She came out as a transgender woman. And in that moment, Lux didn't just reclaim her identity, she became a beacon for thousands who saw their own journey in hers. Her coming out was thoughtful, elegant, and rooted in pride. Supported publicly by her brother, The Last of Us star Pedro Pascal, Lux quickly became a symbol of trans visibility in Latin America, a region where such declarations are still met with risk. But Lux didn't flinch. She stood in front of the camera, not just as an actress, but as herself, fully, fiercely, beautifully. Since then, she's used her platform to challenge norms, speak up for LGBTQ+ rights, and take on roles that reflect her truth. She's not just surviving in the spotlight, she's thriving. And what sets her apart isn't just her bravery, it's her talent. Her performances are electric, intimate, honest. Lux Pascal doesn't want to be remembered for transitioning. She wants to be remembered for transforming the world's expectations, one story at a time. He grew up surrounded by wealth, fashion, and flashbulbs. Peter Brandt Jr. was born into New York high society, the son of billionaire publisher Peter Brandt and supermodel Stephanie Seymour. His world was glossy on the surface, but underneath the curated luxury was a young man determined to define himself outside the shadow of his last name. From early on, Peter challenged expectations of masculinity, of privilege, of how someone from his world was supposed to act. He wasn't afraid of flamboyance. He embraced it. From makeup to heels, from editorial spreads to avant-garde outfits, Peter turned self-expression into a daily ritual of liberation. He never made a dramatic coming-out speech. He simply lived, openly, loudly, proudly. Whether he was walking red carpets in pearls or clapping back at online trolls, Peter brought queerness into elite circles that still squirm at difference. But he didn't just shock, he styled. There was purpose in the polish. In an age where image is currency, Peter used his to make space. His Instagram wasn't just fashion, it was rebellion in Gucci. But Peter's life hasn't been without controversy, run-ins with the law, public mistakes, headlines designed to mock. Yet through it all, he never disappeared. He didn't hide, he grew. He's spoken candidly about mental health, the weight of fame, the pressures of identity. And in doing so, he's transformed from tabloid target to Gen Z queer icon, unapologetic, unfiltered, and still evolving. He reminds us that privilege doesn't cancel pain, and that self-expression is a kind of survival. Before Orange is the New Black, Taylor Schilling was just another actress trying to land a breakout role. She had done indie films, short-lived TV dramas, but nothing quite stuck. And then came Piper Chapman, the privileged, complicated, wildly flawed protagonist of a women's prison dramedy that no one expected to redefine streaming television. Taylor didn't just play Piper, she embodied her, with a performance that was messy, magnetic, and refreshingly real. The show opened the floodgates for queer representation, and in time, it did the same for Taylor herself. For years, she kept her personal life private. Interviews danced around it, fans speculated, but Taylor took her time, and when she did share her truth, it wasn't loud or performative, it was intimate. In 2020, she casually confirmed she was in a relationship with visual artist Emily Ritz. Just like that. No announcement, no press tour, just a quiet post, soft with love and certainty. It wasn't about coming out, it was about letting the world in. Since then, Taylor has continued to choose roles that push boundaries. She's not interested in typecasting or playing it safe. Whether she's exploring sci-fi, drama, or stage work, there's a rawness to her performances that mirrors the way she's chosen to live. With nuance, with integrity, and without the need to explain herself. Taylor Schilling didn't become an icon overnight. She became one the slow way by showing that you can live out loud even when your voice is soft. Ruby Rose didn't just step onto the scene. She burst through it like a lightning bolt in leather. Tattooed, androgynous, and magnetic, she flipped the script on what a leading woman could look like. Born in Australia, Ruby was raised by a single mother who taught her to be bold, kind, and fearlessly herself. From a young age, Ruby knew she wasn't like everyone else, and she didn't want to be. By her teens, she was openly gay. By her 20s, she was modeling, hosting MTV, and challenging gender norms just by walking into a room. But it was a viral short film, Break Free, that made her a global name. In just a few minutes, she transformed from femme to masculine, shedding layers of identity, confronting the binary head-on. The internet exploded. Hollywood followed. Soon, Ruby was cast in Orange is the New Black as Stella Carlin, cool, confident, and unapologetically queer. And from there came Batwoman, John Wick Chapter 2, and a slate of action roles that proved queer actors didn't have to be limited to sidekicks or stereotypes. Yet fame came with pressure. Health issues, overwork, and public scrutiny led Ruby to step away from Batwoman, sparking headlines and speculation. But true to form, she responded with honesty, never bitterness. Ruby Rose is still evolving, still redefining what visibility means. She's not afraid to disappear when needed, or return stronger. For a generation craving authenticity, Ruby isn't just representation, she's revolution, wrapped in ink and steel. He was born into fame, but he never let it define him. Jaden Smith, the son of Will and Jada, could have played it safe, followed the script, stayed in the lines, but from the beginning, Jaden made it clear he wasn't interested in being a carbon copy. Whether he was acting in The Karate Kid, rapping about galaxies, or stepping onto red carpets in skirts and chains, Jaden moved through the world like it was his canvas, and he painted with every color, refusing to dull his light to make others comfortable. People didn't always get it. Critics called it a phase. The press loved to mock his fashion, his tweets, his refusal to explain himself. But Jaden didn't flinch when he began openly referring to rapper Tyler, the creator, as his boyfriend. Whether it was literal, symbolic, or somewhere in between, he set the internet on fire. And while the world debated labels, Jaden kept creating. Music, art, a water company for underserved communities, conversations that made people think twice. He's never declared a fixed identity, and that's the point. Jaden exists beyond binaries, queer, gender fluid, emotionally raw. In a culture obsessed with certainty, he embraces evolution. He wears what he wants, loves who he wants, says what he means. And through it all, he's shown that being a Black queer artist doesn't have to look one way. It can look like courage in color. Chaos with purpose. Jaden Smith is proof that sometimes the loudest form of rebellion is just being free. Punk rock was never about fitting in, and Billie Joe Armstrong made sure of that. As the frontman of Green Day, he snarled his way into pop culture with guy liner, ripped jeans, and a guitar slung like a middle finger. Songs like American Idiot and Boulevard of Broken Dreams weren't just anthems, they were rallying cries. But while the world moshed to his anger, Billie was quietly navigating something far more personal: the fluidity of his own identity. In interviews over the years, he opened up about being bisexual. Casually, honestly, long before it was trendy to do so. He spoke about loving people, not genders, about finding connection beyond labels. And yet the world often looked away, preferring to keep him in the box of angsty frontman instead of queer rock icon. But Billie never pushed, he never had to. His existence, his music, his energy was enough. Every scream, every strum, every lyric was an act of visibility, even if no one called it that at the time. Offstage, Billie Joe has evolved. He's a father, a husband, a man who still sings with fire but lives with grace. He's used his platform to speak on politics, mental health, and love in all its forms. He doesn't make grand gestures, he just tells the truth. And maybe that's the punkest thing of all. Billie Joe Armstrong didn't come out to shock. He came out because that's what real rebels do. They live loud, even when the world isn't ready. She wore crowns on screen, but her real power came from stepping into her truth. Adelaide Kane rose to fame playing Mary, Queen of Scots, in the hit series Reign, captivating audiences with royal grace and raw emotion. Off-screen, though, she wasn't playing a part. She was trying to figure out where she fit, in Hollywood, in love and life. The spotlight was bright, but it didn't reveal everything. For years, Adelaide kept her personal life quiet until she didn't. In 2021, she came out publicly as bisexual on TikTok with humor and heart, because of course she did. The post went viral, not because it was shocking, but because it was so honest, unpolished, relatable. And suddenly, fans saw her not just as a period drama princess, but as a real woman navigating the fluidity of love and identity. She later clarified she's a lesbian, embracing that label with pride and power. And the fans, they loved her even more. But Adelaide didn't stop at one moment of vulnerability. She began opening up about anxiety, ADHD, industry pressure, and the loneliness that fame doesn't fix. Through vlogs, interviews, and social media, she's built a space where queer young people, and especially queer women, feel seen. She's not chasing headlines or leading blockbuster franchises, she's chasing realness. And in a town full of facades, Adelaide Kane is choosing to live like the queens she played, imperfect, brave, and utterly unafraid. She lit up screens as Tori Vega in Victorious, all sparkle, talent, and sunshine energy. To a generation of fans, Victoria Justice was the girl with the voice, the smile, the big break. But behind the pop hooks and red carpet glam, there was always more to her than the Disney-fied image allowed. Like many young stars, Victoria learned early how to perform, not just roles, but expectations. She knew how to make it all look easy, even when it wasn't. As she transitioned into adulthood, she faced the challenge of redefining herself. No longer a teen icon, she began to explore roles with more complexity, more bite. And along the way, she became more open about who she was, not just as an actress, but as a human being. In quiet interviews and subtle social media cues, Victoria expressed her queerness, not with a megaphone, but with authenticity. She never issued a press statement or made it into a headline. She simply embraced her truth and let it speak for itself. Victoria is part of a generation that's changing the rules. She supports LGBTQ rights openly, uses her platform to uplift queer voices, and remains grounded in the belief that love, in all its forms, is something to be celebrated, not explained. Whether she's on stage in front of a camera or just being herself, she carries that message gently but firmly. Victoria Justice isn't about shock or reinvention. She's about slow blooming, about growing into herself in public and doing it with grace. Ella Hunt doesn't need to shout to be heard. With a gaze that's all depth and mystery, and a voice that holds both softness and steel, she's quietly building one of the most interesting careers of her generation. Best known for her role as Sue Gilbert in Dickinson, Ella brought to life a version of queerness that was both historic and strikingly modern. Bold yet tender, unapologetic but full of vulnerability. She didn't just play queer, she understood it. In real life, Ella came out publicly as queer in 2021, describing herself as open to the spectrum of attraction and identity. It wasn't a moment meant to shock or define her. Instead, it was more like a release, a soft exhale of truth. She's spoken candidly about the fluidity of sexuality, about how queerness lives in nuance and evolves with experience. For fans, especially young women figuring themselves out, Ella's openness was a lifeline. A reminder that it's okay not to have it all figured out, and even more okay to live authentically anyway. Ella chooses her roles with care. Whether in indie musicals, period dramas, or intimate coming-of-age stories, she gravitates toward characters with texture. Flawed, curious, emotionally alive. Off-screen, she's just as thoughtful. Her interviews feel more like conversations. Her social media presence is honest, but never curated for applause. Ella Hunt is part of a new wave of queer talent, artists who aren't here to perform identity, but to live it. Fully, softly, powerfully. She entered the pop world like a hurricane in heels, high ponytail, higher notes, and a presence that demanded attention. Ariana Grande wasn't just another teen starlet. She was a vocal powerhouse with Mariah-level range and a Gen Z sensibility. From Nickelodeon sitcoms to sold-out arenas, her ascent was meteoric. But underneath the glitter and vocal runs, Ariana was writing her own rules about music, love, and identity. In 2019, she shook headlines when she spoke openly about her sexuality in her hit song Monopoly, casually dropping the line, "I like women and men." For some, it was a lyric. For others, a soft declaration. Ariana didn't rush to clarify or correct. She let it hang in the air, ambiguous, freeing, and entirely hers. Later, she shared that she doesn't feel the need to label herself, and that queerness for her is fluid. It wasn't a performance. It was presence. And in a world obsessed with labels, Ariana gave us something different. permission to explore without explanation. Beyond music, she's become a fierce advocate for LGBTQ+ rights. She's marched, donated, spoken out, and used her massive platform to elevate queer voices, particularly trans and non-binary youth. For Ariana, it's personal. Her brother, Frankie Grande, is openly gay, and their bond is more than family, it's solidarity. Through heartbreaks, hits, reinventions, and reinforcements, Ariana Grande has made one truth clear: being open, being loving, being yourself. That's the real high note. She didn't just play soccer, she turned the pitch into a protest. With her signature pink hair, bold smirk, and fists raised high, Megan Rapinoe redefined what it means to be a champion. She wasn't just scoring goals, she was starting conversations. From the very beginning, Megan was electric on the field. A winger with lethal precision and ice in her veins. World Cup titles, Olympic gold, Ballon d'Or, but the legacy she's built, it isn't about trophies, it's about truth. Megan came out as gay in 2012, at a time when LGBTQ+ athletes still feared backlash. But Megan wasn't afraid. She stood tall. She kissed her partner, WNBA star Sue Bird, on camera. She protested inequality. She knelt during the national anthem long before it was popular or accepted. She took heat from politicians, headlines, even teammates, but she didn't flinch. She doubled down. Every time they told her to just play, she spoke louder, and the world listened. Today, Megan Rapinoe is more than an athlete. She's a global icon. She's testified before Congress. She's co-written books. She's launched campaigns for equal pay, trans rights, racial justice, and she does it all with style, swagger, and soul. Megan doesn't apologize for who she is or how loudly she fights, because for her, activism isn't separate from sport. It is the sport. She's proof that being queer doesn't just belong on the sidelines, it belongs in the spotlight. Some walked away from the spotlight, others burned brighter in its heat. But every name on this list stood for something bigger than fame. They stood for freedom, for visibility, for the right to exist without hiding. In their love, in their loss, in their loudness or their quiet, they made space for all of us. If their stories moved you, share this video. Let it be a ripple, because every time we speak a name, we keep a flame alive. This is LGBTQ+ vibes, where every truth deserves to be seen. What if telling the truth meant losing everything? Not just your reputation, not just your fans, but everything. In Hollywood, where image is currency and silence sells, some LGBTQ+ stars chose honesty and paid the ultimate price. Careers, roles, pulled. Doors that once swung wide open, slammed shut without warning. But they didn't stay quiet. They came out anyway. In this video, it's not just about fame. It's about what happens when truth collides with power, and power pushes back. Which of these stories hit you the hardest? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe these voices deserve to be heard, subscribe to LGBTQ+ vibes, where real stories finally find their spotlight. When Elliot Page came out as transgender in 2020, the world applauded on the surface. Headlines celebrated his courage, but Hollywood responded with cold silence. After years of acclaim in films like Juno and Inception, Elliot suddenly found himself without major offers. Scripts stopped coming, directors hesitated, casting agents quietly dropped his name from shortlists. Even ongoing roles, like in The Umbrella Academy, were renegotiated under immense pressure. Elliot had gained his identity, but lost the career momentum he had spent decades building. And yet, he remained unapologetic, choosing truth over comfort. His story reminds us that for trans actors, coming out is not the end of a journey, it's the beginning of a battle. Kristen Stewart, once dubbed the queen of teen franchises after Twilight, Kristen Stewart was everywhere until she decided to live her truth. After quietly coming out and showing up on red carpets with female partners, the backlash hit fast. Studio executives began pulling back. Offers for blockbuster leads declined. Directors labeled her difficult to brand. She was told her openness made her less relatable to audiences. Some scripts were pulled, without explanation. For years, Kristen retreated into indie films, not by choice, but by necessity. It was only when the industry began to evolve that she was welcomed back into bigger spaces. Her career survived, but the cost was clear. In Hollywood, being queer and visible was never part of the plan. Kristen Stewart, once dubbed the queen of teen franchises after Twilight, Kristen Stewart was everywhere until she decided to live her truth. After quietly coming out and showing up on red carpets with female partners, the backlash hit fast. Studio executives began pulling back. Offers for blockbuster leads declined. Directors labeled her difficult to brand. She was told her openness made her less relatable to audiences. Some scripts were pulled, without explanation. For years, Kristen retreated into indie films, not by choice, but by necessity. It was only when the industry began to evolve that she was welcomed back into bigger spaces. Her career survived, but the cost was clear. In Hollywood, being queer and visible was never part of the plan. In the 1980s, Rupert Everett was poised to become Hollywood's next leading man. He had the looks, the accent, the charm, and he also had a secret. But Rupert didn't keep it for long. In 1989, at the height of his rising fame, he came out as gay. What followed wasn't celebration, it was silence. Big roles stopped arriving. Studios that once welcomed him no longer returned calls. He was told flat out, gay men couldn't play romantic leads. Despite starring in hits like My Best Friend's Wedding, the damage had been done. Rupert has said openly, coming out ruined my career. But he never regretted it. He chose to live honestly, even if that honesty cost him the career he had worked so hard to build. His journey is a cautionary tale wrapped in courage and a reminder that visibility in Hollywood still comes with a price tag. He turned rejection into resilience, forging his own path in an industry that tried to erase him. Hunter Schafer burst onto the scene in Euphoria, mesmerizing viewers with her performance and presence. As a transgender woman, her very existence on screen was revolutionary. But behind the beauty and breakthrough, Hunter has faced a wave of pressure that few ever see. From online harassment to casting skepticism, she has had to fight harder just to be seen as an actress, not a statement. Even as brands celebrated her visibility, whispers about whether she could lead a mainstream project persisted. In a supposedly progressive industry, the doors remain half closed, and the weight of representation can be crushing. Hunter has spoken about the exhaustion of carrying expectations, not just as a performer, but as a symbol. Yet she keeps showing up boldly, reminding the world that trans talent is not a trend, it's here to stay. For Chaz Bono, the price of truth was deeply personal. Born to music royalty, Sonny and Cher, he was thrust into the public eye from childhood. In the late 1990s, he came out as a lesbian and faced public backlash. But in 2009, when Chaz transitioned and came out as a transgender man, the criticism turned cruel. Media outlets mocked his appearance, offers stopped, invitations dried up, even parts of the LGBTQ+ community struggled to understand. While others were applauded for being themselves, Chaz was dissected and dismissed. He lost opportunities, endorsements, and was reduced to tabloid fodder. Yet he persisted, writing, speaking, and showing the world that transition is not about spectacle, but survival. His courage paved the way for trans visibility, even as it cost him nearly everything else. Chaz continues to advocate for trans rights, proving that strength isn't just about surviving. It's about using your scars to light the path for others. Not every fall from grace is loud. Sometimes it happens in whispers, endorsement deals that never finalize, TV invitations that stop coming, headlines that quietly move on. When Ricky Martin came out in 2010, the world cheered, but the business world pulled back. Though beloved globally, Ricky saw brand collaborations fade, radio airplay decline in conservative markets, and his crossover momentum slow. It was as if the very thing that made him more human made him less marketable. For years, he had hidden his truth to protect his career. Now that he lived freely, parts of the industry no longer saw him the same. Ricky didn't just come out for himself, he did it knowing he might lose the spotlight. And even as it dimmed, he stayed exactly who he was, proud, resilient, and unshakably honest. Behind the music and fame was a man who chose authenticity over applause and gave a generation permission to do the same. Some prices are paid in silence, others in prime time. When Grey's Anatomy was at its peak, Knight made the brave decision to come out publicly after a backstage incident forced his hand. But what followed wasn't support, it was erasure. His character was slowly written off, screen time reduced, and before long, he was gone from the series altogether. While fans speculated, Knight quietly carried the weight of being the only openly gay male lead on a major network show at the time. The industry wasn't ready, and he bore the consequences. In interviews, he later shared the anxiety and isolation he felt during that period. He didn't come out for applause, he came out because silence was killing him. And though the applause faded, the integrity never did. Knight walked away from the spotlight with his dignity intact, proving that self-respect is sometimes the only role worth fighting for. Some actors become household names, others become foundations, quiet, steady, and essential. BD Wong is one of the latter. With powerful roles in Jurassic Park, Law & Order SVU, and Mr. Robot, he built a stellar career. But when he publicly came out as gay in the early 2000s, casting dynamics shifted. Suddenly, leading man offers vanished. He was told, directly and indirectly, that his sexuality limited his range. It wasn't about talent, it was about perception. BD pivoted to stage work and voice acting, where authenticity mattered more than image. He kept building, but never forgot how quickly the rules changed once he told the truth. He once said, "It's not that they stopped calling, it's that they stopped seeing." And that, for many actors, is a deeper loss than rejection. Even so, he chose presence over pretense, and became an icon of strength without needing the spotlight to define him. Sometimes courage comes late, but hits harder because of it. Ian McKellen was already a seasoned Shakespearean actor when he came out as gay in 1988, during a radio debate over a proposed British law banning promotion of homosexuality. He was 49. While his truth inspired millions, the industry was not immediately kind. Certain casting directors quietly turned away. Some roles vanished, without explanation. Yet, Ian didn't flinch. He leaned in, transforming his career into something bigger than just performance. From Gandalf to Magneto, he became a global icon, while never hiding who he was again. But the truth remains, had he come out sooner, his journey might have looked very different. He paid a quiet price, but in doing so, opened doors for others to walk through more freely. Sir Ian turned adversity into legacy. His voice didn't just echo on stage, it rewrote what dignity in the face of delay can look like. It was 1997 when Ellen DeGeneres made television history by saying two simple words, "I'm gay." Both in real life and in character, she came out to the world. The applause was immediate, but the backlash was brutal. Her sitcom was canceled. Advertisers pulled out. She was blacklisted from major networks. For years, Ellen disappeared from Hollywood, a comedian without a stage. The same industry that once embraced her turned cold. Depression followed. Self-doubt crept in, but eventually she came back stronger, launching a new show that redefined daytime TV. Still, the gap in her career was real, and the trauma lasting. Ellen's story is a triumph, yes, but it's also a reminder that telling the truth can cost you everything before it sets you free. She paved a way for countless others by walking through fire and still returning with grace. For some, coming out is a quiet revolution. Sarah Gilbert, known for her roles in Roseanne and The Talk, lived in the public eye for most of her life. But behind the scenes, she struggled with how and when to share her truth. When she finally came out in the early 2000s, she was terrified of what it might do to her career. While she wasn't met with outright rejection, opportunities didn't grow either. Producers hesitated. Certain roles slipped away. Even on the talk, she often held back when conversations turned personal. Sarah once said, "I didn't want to be defined by my orientation." And yet, in staying silent for so long, she felt invisible. Her story is one of quiet bravery, a woman learning to speak at her own pace, even in a world that demanded either silence or spectacle. She reminds us that there's more than one way to be out, and every version still matters. At first glance, Colton Haynes had everything: fame, beauty, and a fan base that adored him in shows like Teen Wolf and Arrow. But behind the scenes, he was unraveling. For years, he was told to keep quiet about his sexuality. Studio handlers warned him, "You'll lose your audience." So he played the game, attended fake dates, gave vague interviews, smiled through the pain. When he finally came out in 2016, it was a cry for survival. His mental health had crumbled under the pressure. And while he received praise from fans, casting offers slowed. The leading man roles he once landed effortlessly were suddenly out of reach. Coming out didn't kill his career, but it wounded it. And it forced Colton to rebuild not just his image, but his entire sense of self. His vulnerability became his power, showing young queer fans that healing is messy, but always worth it. Matt Bomer's rise was as smooth as his charm. With his breakout role in White Collar, he quickly became a fan favorite and a studio darling. But in 2012, when he casually thanked his partner during an awards speech, everything changed. It wasn't a dramatic coming out, just a moment of honesty. Yet the backlash from within the industry was immediate. Producers began to doubt his believability as a straight romantic lead. Big-budget scripts disappeared. Roles he was once shortlisted for went to others. Matt has said very little about the shift, but those close to him noticed. He continued to work, yes, but not in the same spotlight he once owned. His decision to be real came with a cost, and it's one many still pretend doesn't exist. Still, he never looked back, because loving freely was a bigger reward than any role on screen. Few coming-out moments have been as bold or as risky as Lil Nas X's. In the midst of his Old Town Road global takeover, he revealed he was gay. The music world, especially within hip-hop and black culture, responded with a mix of celebration and backlash. He was accused of ruining his image, mocked by fellow artists, and even booed at some events. But Lil Nas X didn't retreat. He doubled down. With provocative visuals and unapologetic lyrics, he turned his queerness into power. Yet behind the confidence was real cost. Lost collaborations, strained industry ties, and threats that came daily. He transformed resistance into revolution, proving that queer artists don't need permission to exist at center stage. Every track became a protest, every video a declaration. And through it all, he smiled, because being himself was the greatest chart topper of all. In the late 90s, Lance Bass stood at the top of the pop world as a member of NSYNC. But while millions screamed his name, he was quietly drowning in fear. The pressure to stay in the closet was relentless, from managers, labels, and even fans. He played the role: straight dates, rehearsed interviews, and a smile that masked suffocation. When he finally came out in 2006, long after the group disbanded, the support was warm, but also late. Lance admitted he didn't come out sooner because he feared it would ruin everything. And in many ways, it could have. He watched others lose careers, and he wasn't ready to risk it. His story is a painful reminder that even at the height of success, some truths feel too dangerous to speak. And yet, when he finally did, he gained something far more valuable than fame: peace. Joel Kim Booster didn't fit anyone's mold. A gay, Korean-American comedian raised in a conservative Christian household, he entered Hollywood with no blueprint and even fewer allies. When he began incorporating his sexuality and racial identity into his work, he was told to dial it down. Agencies passed, rooms went silent. But Joel kept pushing. Eventually, he broke through with Fire Island, a film unapologetically queer and Asian. Still, he faced criticism from both outside and within the LGBTQ+ community. Too bold, too specific, too political. The very traits that made his voice vital were seen as risky. Joel didn't lose one big job for being out. He lost dozens of smaller chances, rooms he never got into, shows he never got to pitch. But he succeeded anyway, not by changing himself, but by creating space where others like him could finally exist. He proved that you don't need to fit the mold to break it. She grew up in America's living rooms. As the child star of The Cosby Show and later That's So Raven, Raven-Symoné was more than famous. She was iconic. But behind the bright energy was a young woman terrified of her truth. Raven didn't publicly come out until her late 20s, admitting she had been afraid of losing everything she built. Even after coming out, she was cautious, avoiding LGBTQ+ labels, sidestepping political topics, and carefully managing her image. She later revealed that Disney advised her not to make her private life public, fearing backlash. Her experience proves that even in family-friendly fame, the weight of hiding is real, and the pressure to be marketable can silence even the boldest voices. Raven once said, "I didn't want to be labeled, I just wanted to be me." Her quiet resistance became a quiet revolution, showing that authenticity doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply stands firm. Kanan Lonsdale was a rising star with a growing fan base, thanks to roles in The Flash and Love, Simon. But even after starring in a landmark gay teen romance, he didn't feel ready to come out publicly. The fear ran deep, not just of public opinion, but of the industry machine. When he finally did come out as bisexual and gender fluid, the shift was subtle, but real. Some calls stopped coming. Certain auditions went cold. Though he was celebrated on social media, behind the scenes he sensed a chill. He said, "Coming out didn't make me braver overnight. It just made me more aware of who was never really on my side." His story shows that visibility matters, but it still comes with invisible costs. Still, Kanan chose vulnerability over silence, and in doing so, inspired countless others to stand in the space between fear and freedom. For much of his early career, George Michael lived two lives. As the voice behind Faith and Careless Whisper, he was a global sex symbol. But the real man stayed hidden. Fearing the backlash that had crushed other artists, George remained closeted throughout the 80s and early 90s. It wasn't until a public scandal in 1998 forced his hand that he came out. The world reacted with shock and judgment. Radio stations pulled his songs. Tabloids had a field day. Despite his massive talent, he was never treated the same again. George spent the rest of his life reclaiming his identity, turning pain into activism and art. But one truth remains: he never got to come out on his own terms, and the industry never truly forgave him for being real. And yet, in every note he sang after, you could hear the voice of a man finally unburdened, even if the world never stopped punishing him for it. They told the truth, and the world turned its back. These stars lost roles, respect, and sometimes everything, just for being who they are. But they spoke anyway. Their courage wasn't always loud, it wasn't always rewarded, but it was real. And that matters. Thank you for watching. If their stories moved you, subscribe to LGBTQ+ Vibes and help us keep their voices alive. Because being seen should never come at such a high cost. Let's keep the conversation going. Drop a comment below and remind the world: no one should ever have to choose between their truth and their dreams. Coming out before you can even vote? That's not just brave, that's legendary. While most teens are still figuring things out, these young stars said, "This is me," and owned it in front of the world. No waiting, no hiding, just truth. On LGBTQ+ Vibes, meet 10 of Hollywood's youngest openly gay celebrities, Gen Z icons who came out swinging. Who do you think was the boldest of them all? Drop your thoughts below. Joshua Rush wasn't your average child actor. He was out here booking roles while the rest of us were still learning how to tie our shoes. From voice work in Gravity Falls to guest spots on Heroes and Criminal Minds, the kid had range. But it was his role as Cyrus Goodman on Andy Mack that made Disney history. Cyrus became the first openly gay lead character on Disney Channel, And Joshua's performance turned a groundbreaking moment into something honest, heartfelt, and unforgettable. Here's the twist. While playing a gay character on national TV, Joshua hadn't come out himself yet. Imagine navigating your own identity while millions watched and speculated. But at 17, he casually dropped a tweet. First to say it, I'm bi. And just like that, he came out with the same confidence most teens reserve for choosing a prom outfit. No drama, no fanfare, just pure Gen Z realness. Since then, Joshua has evolved from Disney star to political powerhouse. He's interned for congressmen, spoken out for LGBTQ+ rights, and become a voice for Gen Z activism, all while still being charming enough to host a talk show. He's proof that you can grow up in Hollywood, come out proud, and still keep your sense of humor. Drop a heart if you're ready for the Joshua Rush reboot. We know we are. Damien Terriquez didn't just enter the scene. They burst onto it in platform boots and glitter eyeliner, serving fearless energy in Netflix's glamorous as dismal failure. Ironic name considering how iconic they were. With their bold style and sharp wit, Damien brought non-binary and queer joy to the screen like a confetti cannon. Loud, fabulous, and impossible to ignore. Openly gay and non-binary from the jump, Damien never tried to blend in. They owned their identity with a wink and a mic drop. Growing up without many people like them on screen, Damien chose to become what they never saw, authentic representation with attitude. Whether it's on set or on social media, their presence tells every young queer person watching, you don't have to shrink to be seen. Now, they're not just acting, they're trailblazing. A voice for queer youth, a walking fashion statement, and proof that visibility can be fierce and fun. And if you think Damien's story is inspiring, wait until you meet Tenacio Elizarraras, a rising star putting culture, queerness, and authenticity front and center. Amandla Stenberg wasn't just another child star, she was a movement in the making. At just 12 years old, she captured hearts worldwide as Rue in the Hunger Games, delivering a performance so powerful it left audiences breathless. But even as the world took notice of her acting chops, Amandla was already stepping into something bigger, using her voice to speak out on race, gender, and identity, long before most teens were even allowed to have social media. By 19, she came out as gay and later shared her non-binary identity, adding another layer of honesty to her already fearless public persona. Amandla didn't need a headline-grabbing coming-out moment. She simply spoke her truth, and the world listened. She's never tried to fit into Hollywood's preset boxes. Instead, she's been too busy redesigning them, and occasionally setting them on fire with style and grace. Today, Amandla is more than an actress. She's a cultural compass. Whether she's starring in boundary-pushing films or dropping truth bombs in interviews, she makes it clear. Being young, black, queer, and outspoken isn't something to overcome. It's something to celebrate. And if Amandla showed us how bold Gen Z can be, just wait until you meet Miles Gutierrez Riley, who's bringing his own brand of authenticity to Hollywood's next chapter. Miles Gutierrez Riley. With his magnetic screen presence and quiet intensity, Miles first turned heads in The Wilds, Amazon Prime's gritty teen survival drama where he brought emotional depth and charm to the role of Ivan Taylor. While most actors fade into the ensemble, Miles made sure his character stood out, thoughtful, layered, and unapologetically queer. But he didn't stop there. In 2024, he took things to the next level with a chilling performance in Smile 2, showing the world that yes, he can handle horror. And no, you will not forget his face once the credits roll. What makes Miles unique isn't just his talent, it's his fearlessness in bringing his full self to every role. Openly gay and proud, he's never tried to play it safe or water down who he is for Hollywood's comfort. He brings vulnerability, strength, and a whole lot of honesty to the screen. And it's working. Outside of acting, Miles has become a quiet icon for Gen Z viewers looking for real representation. He's not chasing headlines or viral moments. He's building a career with intention, one powerful performance at a time. And with each role, he's proving that queer Latino stories aren't just worthy of being told. They deserve the spotlight. Tonatiuh Elizarraz isn't just a fresh face in Hollywood, he's a whole movement wrapped in talent and purpose. He first caught attention with his role in Vida, the starred series praised for its unapologetic portrayal of Latinx queer identity. Tonatiuh brought depth and authenticity to a character that wasn't just part of the story. He was the story, and it resonated deeply with viewers who rarely saw themselves represented. He continued that momentum with a standout performance in Promised Land, playing a complex young man in a family drama layered with cultural history and modern struggle. But Tonatiuh isn't just acting, he's advocating. Openly gay and proudly Mexican-American, he's spoken openly about the challenges of being queer and brown in an industry still learning how to tell those stories right. And instead of waiting for change, he's helping lead it. With each role, Tonatiuh proves that representation isn't a trend, it's a responsibility. And he's handling it with grace, power, and just enough charm to keep us hooked. Now, if Tonatiuh's gift is slow burn gravitas, get ready for someone who made headlines by jumping headfirst into horror and history. Meet Cooper Koch. Cooper Koch didn't exactly sneak into Hollywood, he kicked the door open with a scream. Starting out in indie horror, he made an early splash in Swallowed, 2022. A bold, bizarre thriller that had people asking, who is that guy? And why is he so good at being terrified? With sharp instincts and a face that screams leading man, Cooper proved he could handle blood, suspense, and weird storylines like a total pro. But 2024 was the year everything changed. Cast as Eric Menendez in Monsters, The Lyle and Eric Menendez story, Cooper dove headfirst into one of the most psychologically complex roles of his career. Critics praised him for bringing nuance and depth to a real-life tragedy that could have easily become tabloid bait. It wasn't just a breakout, it was a statement. Cooper wasn't here to play it safe. He was here to play it real. Openly gay and refreshingly candid, Cooper has talked about the pressures he faced early on, especially being told his voice was too soft or not traditionally masculine enough. Instead of changing himself, he chose to change the game. Now he's not just rising, he's redefining what a queer leading man can look and sound like. And with every role, he's carving a path for others to follow. Zane Phillips didn't just walk onto our screens, he strutted in like he owned the frame. With chiseled cheekbones and a smirk that says, I know your secrets and your skincare routine, Zane first made waves with supporting roles in Legacies and the CW's Dynasty. But it wasn't until 2022's Fire Island that he officially went from, hey, isn't that the guy from, to, okay, I need his entire filmography and possibly a fan club jacket. In Fire Island, Zane played the sizzling, slightly mysterious Will, a modern-day Mr. Darcy with abs and attitude. The film was a queer rom-com revelation, and Zane delivered every glance, pause, and emotionally repressed line with award-worthy precision. He followed it up by playing Chad in Glamorous, Netflix 2023, where he got to flex not only his comedic timing, but also his jawline. Again, critics noticed, fans swooned, and casting directors started paying very close attention. Off-screen, Zane is openly gay and refreshingly self-aware. He's talked about the weird in-between space of being too masked to be seen as queer and too queer to be seen as mainstream, which, ironically, makes him the perfect person to break those outdated boxes. He's witty in interviews, honest about the industry, and always dressed like he just walked off a Vogue set. Ezra Miller has never exactly been Hollywood standard, and that's their superpower. From their breakout role in After School to the haunting We Need to Talk About Kevin, Ezra built a reputation for playing characters that live on the edge, and sometimes over it. Then came The Perks of Being a Wallflower, where Ezra stole every scene as Patrick, the loud, proud, and deeply layered queer teen that many viewers had never seen on screen before. It was raw, it was real, and it was unforgettable. Off-screen, Ezra came out as queer and later identified as non-binary, challenging gender norms in both red carpet fashion and real-life conversations. They didn't just break the mold, they set it on fire and wore it as a necklace to the Met Gala. Whether flying through the DCEU as the Flash or appearing in Fantastic Beasts, Ezra has balanced blockbuster fame with unapologetic individuality, proving that queer identity can and should exist at the center of mainstream storytelling. While their journey hasn't been without controversy, one thing remains clear. Ezra made space where there was none, and in doing so, gave visibility to a whole new kind of queer star, one that bends genre, gender, and expectation. And speaking of groundbreaking queer stars, let's rewind to the boy who brought glitter, high notes, and unapologetic pride to every hallway of Glee. Yes, it's time for Chris Colfer. Chris Colfer, before queer teens had TikTok icons or Netflix crushes, they had Kurt Hummel, and that meant they had Chris Colfer. Bursting onto the scene in Glee, Chris wasn't just playing the role of a fabulous, bullied, he was reshaping the narrative of what LGBTQ+ characters could be on primetime television. With one raised eyebrow and a falsetto stronger than most people's 5-year plans, Chris left a mark that was impossible to ignore. Off-screen, he came out early in his career, turning quiet bravery into a loud message of hope. Chris didn't try to fit the Hollywood mold, he redefined it. By 21, he had already won a Golden Globe, landed a spot on the Time 100 list, and casually become a best-selling author. While most young actors were still auditioning, Chris was out here building a creative universe, and doing it all with humility, heart, and humor. To this day, Chris Colfer remains a shining example of how authenticity can change culture. He didn't just open the door, he swung it wide open in a perfectly tailored outfit. And while Kurt helped lead a generation into the light, there's another performer bringing depth, charm, and a whole lot of Regency-era romance to global screens. Get ready, because Jonathan Bailey is about to take center stage. Jonathan Bailey. Before Jonathan Bailey made fans across the globe swoon in silk waistcoats and long Regency stares, he was already quietly building one of the most versatile resumes in British television. A child actor turned West End darling, Jonathan had roles in everything from Broadchurch to Doctor Who, charming critics and audiences alike. But it was on the stage where he truly shined, winning the Laurence Olivier Award for Best Actor in a Supporting Role in a Musical for Company in 2019, proving he could sing, dance, act, and emotionally wreck you, all in one number. Then came Bridgerton, the role that turned him into a global sensation. As Anthony Bridgerton, he brought more than just smoldering glances. He gave the character unexpected depth, inner conflict, and enough longing to melt Netflix's servers. His season wasn't just about romance, it was about transformation, and it worked. Jonathan turned a period piece into a cultural event, and audiences couldn't get enough. Off-screen, he came out publicly as gay and spoke openly about the challenges of being a queer actor in a still-closeted industry. But instead of hiding, he rose, gracefully, powerfully, and without compromise. From Disney darlings to period drama princes, these 10 young LGBTQ+ stars are redefining what it means to shine in Hollywood. They've played heroes, heartbreakers, rebels, and role models, not just in front of the camera, but in real life. And whether they came out in a tweet, on a red carpet, or through a quiet, honest moment, each of them proved that truth is the boldest role of all. Drop a heart if you think these stars are lighting up Hollywood like never before. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow our channel for more amazing LGBTQ+ stories. Your support keeps the rainbow shining. What if the biggest coming out story never actually comes out? What happens when the world keeps asking questions and the stars just keep us guessing? In this episode of LGBTQ+ Vibes, we're diving into 10 young male celebrities who've sparked endless speculation. Not because of any big announcement, but because their energy, style, and connections have the internet whispering, maybe. Think one of them's living their truth? Type vibes if you love a good soft launch mystery. Darren Barn. In the glittering world of Hollywood, some stars shine brighter not just for their talent, but for the mystery that surrounds them. And Darren Barnett is one of them. Best known for playing the irresistible Paxton Hall Yoshida in Netflix's coming-of-age hit Never Have I Ever, Barnett quickly became a heartthrob for a new generation of fans. With his chiseled features, charming smirk, and undeniable screen presence, it's no surprise he became a breakout star. But while millions of fans obsess over his every move, what truly keeps Darren Barnett in the spotlight isn't just his career. It's the enigma of who he really is when the cameras stop rolling. In 2023, things took an intriguing turn when Barn appeared in Gran Turismo, where a tender, emotionally vulnerable scene with a male co-star caught viewers off guard, in the best way. It wasn't overt, but it was enough to spark a frenzy of speculation. Fans praised the moment for its authenticity and subtlety, wondering if it hinted at something deeper. Off-screen, Darren has always maintained a low profile. He's been seen in close, sometimes affectionate interactions with both male and female co-stars, but never addresses rumors directly. In an era where many celebrities share every aspect of their lives, Barnett's silence feels louder than words. And maybe that's what makes him so fascinating. He doesn't deny, doesn't confirm. He simply exists in that quiet space between assumption and truth. Whether it's a deliberate strategy or a deeply personal boundary, no one can say for sure. But one thing's clear. As conversations about sexuality and identity continue to evolve, Darren Barnett remains one of Hollywood's most intriguing question marks. And he's not alone. Because if there's one actor who rivals Darren in charm, mystery, and media fascination, it's the ever-enigmatic Charles Melton. Charles Melton doesn't need to say much to get people talking. With that soft stare, leading man charm, and disarmingly gentle energy, he's made an entire generation of fans lean in and whisper the same question. Wait, is he? He rose to fame as Reggie in Riverdale, a show soaked in teen drama and queer energy. But unlike many of his co-stars, Charles never chased the spotlight. While others played up their press personas, Charles stayed low-key, almost enigmatic. And maybe that's what made him even more intriguing. Over the years, his fashion choices have leaned softly androgynous. Think turtlenecks, soft knits, and a vulnerability in red carpet photos that's rare in Hollywood's hyper-masculine landscape. He wasn't loud about anything, but something about the way he moved through fame always felt different. What truly shifted things, though, was December. His performance in the 2023 film stunned critics, not just for its complexity, but for how Charles fully stepped into a role that required emotional nuance, sexual ambiguity, and intense vulnerability. Suddenly, he wasn't just the hot guy from Riverdale. He was something deeper. And fans noticed. Then came the photos, candid shots with male friends that had zooming in just a little too hard. Stylized editorial spreads that gave fashion twink with secrets energy, a lack of any recent public relationships, and a silence on the topic that only added fuel to the fire. Was it anything definitive? No. But in the world of queer-coded celebrity culture, it was enough to start a conversation. And the LGBTQ+ internet did not hold back. TikTok edits, Twitter threads, Reddit theories. Charles Melton slowly became a soft obsession. Not because he came out, but because he didn't. Because in every choice, every look, every role, there's just enough to wonder and enough to hope. But maybe the most beautiful part of Charles's mystery is that he's never pushed back, never made jokes at queer fans' expense, never shut the conversation down. He simply lets people feel what they feel. And for many in the LGBTQ+ community, that unspoken respect means everything. Whether he ever says anything or not, Charles Melton has become a symbol of possibility. That queerness doesn't always have to be declared. That ambiguity can be soft. That silence can be sacred. Think Charles is quietly rewriting what it means to be a heartthrob in 2025. Type SOT in the comments if you love when a mystery feels just a little too beautiful to solve. Michael Cimino, the teen idol who walked into queer fame and stayed. When Michael Cimino first stepped into the spotlight as Victor Salazar on Love, Victor, fans assumed he was just another young actor playing a gay character. But what no one expected was just how naturally he'd fit into queer culture, both on and off screen. He wasn't gay, he said, but he supported the community deeply, authentically, and he wanted to tell Victor's story with empathy and truth. His performance was raw, emotional, sometimes awkward, sometimes brave, just like the coming out stories of so many LGBTQ viewers watching at home. And queer fans didn't just appreciate him, they embraced him. What followed wasn't your typical straight actor once and done. Michael didn't move on from queer content. He leaned in. He kept showing up at Pride events. He kept saying yes to interviews that explored masculinity, fluidity, and emotional vulnerability. He stayed close to the fan base not for clout, but with a kind of quiet sincerity that made people feel like he got it. And that's when the speculation started to shift. Not because Michael said something, but because of how much he didn't say. He often talked about understanding both sides of attraction. He wore clothing with just the right amount of softness. His Instagram felt like it had been curated by someone who knew exactly what gay TikTok wanted. And the roles he took? Still queer adjacent, still emotionally tender, still lingering. Fans noticed and they started to wonder, was this just a good ally or someone writing their own quiet story? But Michael never pulled the usual PR moves. No performative girlfriend posts, no reactive statements to the rumors, no shutting the door. He just let people talk. Let queer kids project. Let fans find hope in his silence. In a time where coming out can be a press cycle or a viral headline, Michael Cimino's mystery feels different. It feels gentle, patient, intentional. Like he's crafting something slower, something that doesn't need labels to resonate. The truth is, no one knows what Michael Cimino identifies as. And maybe that's the point, because for so many fans watching him, young, queer, unsure, he's already done what matters, made them feel seen, safe, and celebrated. Whether he ever says the words or not, Michael has become something rare, a soft icon for a generation that doesn't need hard definitions to feel deeply connected. Think Michael's queer-coded energy speaks louder than words? Type LIMINAL in the comments if you love a star who lives in the space between. The pretty boy with a private life and a queer fan base. If Hollywood had a checklist for queer-coded heartthrobs, Gavin Leatherwood would check every box twice. Brooding stare? Check. Ambiguous fashion sense? Absolutely. Roles that flirt with queerness without fully crossing the line? You already know. But here's the thing. Gavin never had to try. He just appeared on screen in Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, raised an eyebrow, smirked at the camera, and suddenly gay Twitter claimed him. No debate, no discussion, just vibes. He was theirs. On the show, his character Nicholas Scratch had just the right amount of fluid energy, flirty, mysterious, and dangerously charming. But it wasn't just the role. It was Gavin himself. How he carried it, how he smiled in interviews, how he seemed just slightly out of reach, like he was in on a secret no one else could quite decode. And outside the show, Gavin kept that mystique alive. He shared just enough on social media to stay relevant, but never too much. No loud declarations, no girlfriend reveals, no clickbait relationships, just dreamy black and white photos, the occasional guitar strum and captions that could be interpreted however you wanted, which of course only made people want to interpret them more. The fan edits came fast. The TikTok thirst traps, the he's giving queer threads. People weren't just watching, they were decoding. Was that nail polish for fun or for something more? Was that gaze a pose or a message? Was that lyric a hint? Gavin never confirmed anything. He also never denied anything. And that silence, it became part of the story. What set him apart, though, was how gently he held space for it all. He never mocked the speculation, never made fans feel silly for reading into things. Instead, he leaned into softness, into fashion, into intimacy. And in a landscape filled with carefully constructed PR masks, Gavin's quiet ambiguity felt real and deeply magnetic. In 2025, his name still pops up in Is He or Isn't He threads, but at this point it's less about the label and more about the feeling. Gavin represents a kind of modern masculinity that resonates with queer fans. Warm, emotional, expressive, but never overly explained. He exists in that sweet in-between, and maybe that's exactly where he wants to stay. Whether he ever defines himself or not, Gavin Leatherwood has already offered the queer community something valuable. Permission to be unreadable, to be soft without labels, to wear a little eyeliner and still be taken seriously, to be adored just as you are. Think Gavin is perfectly queer-coded without ever saying a word? Type Enigma in the comments if you live for the ones who don't need to explain a thing. The laid-back star who's got everyone reading between the waves. There's something about Rudy Pankow that makes you lean in just a little closer. Maybe it's the messy blonde hair, maybe it's the easygoing smile, or maybe, just maybe, it's the way he carries himself, like someone who's in on a secret he's not quite ready to share. Rudy burst into pop culture consciousness with Outer Banks, playing JJ, the wild, impulsive, loyal to the core surfer kid with a heart full of chaos. And almost instantly, the queer community zeroed in on him. Not just for the role, but for the energy he gave off. Playful, tender, emotionally charged, and undeniably watchable. It wasn't just that JJ felt queer-coded, although he very much did. It was that Rudy embodied him with such intensity. Those longing stares, that reckless loyalty, the way he threw his whole soul into scenes with the other Pogues. Fans didn't just ship characters, they shipped vibes. Outside the show, Rudy kept things just as open-ended. He's charming in interviews, close with his male co-stars, and has a social media presence that's somehow both chaotic and curated. Sometimes he posts goofy behind-the-scenes videos. Other times, poetic captions, soft lighting, shirts unbuttoned just enough to make queer TikTok whisper sir. He's never made a big statement, never labeled himself, never felt the need to clarify. But that's exactly why fans keep wondering, because Rudy doesn't push back on the speculation. He doesn't perform masculinity the way many young male celebs are told to. He just vibes and lets the rest unfold. In a world where coming out is often monetized or performative, Rudy's ambiguity feels different. Honest. Comfortable. Like someone who's still figuring things out, or maybe already knows and simply doesn't owe anyone an explanation. And let's talk about the fashion, because Rudy Pankow might be the only Gen Z heartthrob who can walk a red carpet in nail polish and a crocheted cardigan and make it look like the hottest trend in town without ever saying a word. He doesn't scream queer, he just feels like he could be part of the family, or at least deeply loved by it. It's not about outing, it's not about pressure, it's about presence. And Rudy's presence has created a soft, surfer-shaped space where queer fans can project, dream, and maybe see a bit of themselves. Whether he ever says it out loud or not, Rudy Pankow has become a modern-day icon of emotional openness. And in 2025, that matters more than any label ever could. Think Rudy's chill, cozy chaos is exactly the kind of queer-coded energy we need more of. Type drift in the comments if you live for stars who keep us floating in curiosity. Mason, the Scream King with a soft spot for the gays. There's a reason Mason Gooding keeps landing roles that make the internet collectively gasp. He's charming, he's funny, he's way too good-looking. But beneath the Hollywood son of Cuba Gooding Jr. spotlight, there's something else happening. Something softer, quieter, and very queer-friendly. Let's rewind. Mason's big break came with Booksmart and Love, Victor, where he played Andrew. the cocky jock with emotional depth and the slowest, most satisfying character arc in the series. While he wasn't the central queer character, he was deeply connected to one, and he handled it with nuance, respect, and surprising warmth. Unlike many actors in his position, Mason didn't just show up, deliver lines, and clock out. He engaged. He promoted the show with sensitivity. He spoke openly about the importance of LGBTQ+ representation. And when asked about his own identity, he smiled, nodded, and said he was happy to be part of a story that mattered. It wasn't a yes. It wasn't a no. It was open. And queer fans, oh, they noticed fast. Soon, TikTok was flooded with edits. Twitter threads went deep. People pulled receipts from interviews, red carpets, and panels where Mason would sit just a little too close, compliment his male co-stars just a little too smoothly, and rock a painted nail or a gold chain like he knew exactly who was watching. He's never made a spectacle of it, never posted a rainbow emoji for likes. But his vibe? It's there. The soft jawline, the thoughtful gaze, the unbothered confidence of someone who's entirely comfortable letting you wonder. Even in Scream 6, where he stepped into full slasher star territory, Mason played the tough guy with a knowing wink, as if to say, I know I'm the internet's bisexual boyfriend, and I'm fine with that. What makes Mason especially magnetic to LGBTQ+ fans isn't just his looks, though let's be honest, it's his intelligence, his openness, and his refusal to box himself in. He talks about mental health, he praises queer artists, he chooses roles that live in emotional complexity, and he never once makes queer speculation feel like an attack. In a media landscape that still punishes softness in men, Mason's quiet fluidity feels like a revolution. Maybe he's straight. Maybe he's questioning. Maybe he's just secure enough to not care how you interpret him. Whatever the truth is, queer fans have already made their choice. Mason Gooding is one of ours, whether he knows it or not. Think Mason's energy is the definition of modern masculinity with queer undertones? Type blur in the comments if you love a man who doesn't need clarity to be iconic. The gentleman mystery wrapped in velvet and smolder. From the moment he appeared in Bridgerton, the internet didn't just fall in love, they spiraled. That accent, that stare, that impossibly elegant restraint. As the Duke of Hastings, Roger didn't just act, he unraveled. He whispered entire emotional arcs with a glance, seduced entire scenes with a breath. But what kept audiences coming back wasn't just the romance or the Regency flair, it was the tension. The sense that there was something deeper humming beneath the polished surface. Something private, something tender, something he wasn't quite letting us see. Unlike many breakout stars, Roger didn't rush to extend his fame. He didn't oversaturate himself across genres or platforms. Instead, he chose projects carefully, spoke thoughtfully, and let the silence in his life speak volumes. While tabloids clawed for details, relationship statuses, candid moments, proof of anything, Roger stayed still. Always courteous, always composed, always just out of reach. It's that distance, that intentional privacy, that's made fans, especially queer fans, lean in closer. The elegant suiting, the romantic poise, the clear admiration for fluidity in storytelling, it all adds to a portrait of a man who doesn't need to say much to be felt deeply. He's become the kind of heartthrob who doesn't chase identity headlines but lets the work, the presence, and the aura speak for itself. And maybe that's what makes Roger Jean Page so fascinating in 2025. While other stars define, declare, or defend, he simply exists in that velvet space between allure and ambiguity. He doesn't toy with fans. He doesn't dismiss curiosity. He just carries himself like a man who knows that softness and mystery aren't opposites, they're allies. Whether he ever chooses to share more or not, Roger's impact is already clear. He's redefined what a leading man can be. He's proof that masculinity can smolder and still hold space for wonder. And for a generation that finds freedom in nuance, Roger Jean Page has become not just a fantasy, but a feeling. Think Roger as the perfect blend of elegance and enigma? Type velvet in the comments if you believe that sometimes mystery is the boldest form of honesty. The Gen Z dreamboat who said the quiet part out loud and then let the silence linger. It started, innocently enough, with a comment about Harry Styles. "I guess this is my coming out video," he joked in an interview. And just like that, the internet caught fire. Headlines exploded. Tweets turned to essays. TikTok turned that 6-second clip into something bigger, something louder. But what came next wasn't a press tour, a label, or a rainbow-colored rebrand. Instead, Joshua clarified, he didn't want to put himself in a box. He wasn't ready to define it. And in that pause, that not quite yes and not quite no, something remarkable happened. He found himself at the heart of a new kind of queer iconography. Because Joshua Bassett didn't need to declare anything. The queer fanbase had already chosen him, not out of projection, but out of resonance. There was something in the softness of his performances, in the way he sang about heartbreak like it was a shared secret, in how he spoke about healing, vulnerability, and faith in the same breath. His energy, boyish but wise, gentle but stormy, felt safe, felt seen, and maybe most importantly, felt real. While other young stars tiptoed around speculation, Joshua let it sit, let people wonder, let queer kids hope. And hope, when you're young and uncertain, is everything. In 2025, Joshua Bassett isn't just that guy from High School Musical, the musical, the series. He's a mirror for a generation that's still figuring it all out. One lyric, one heartbreak, one quiet, maybe at a time. He doesn't owe anyone an answer, and maybe that's the answer itself. Whether he's queer, questioning, or simply open-hearted in a world desperate for categories, Joshua represents something softer, something beautifully undone. He's not just closeted, he's complicated. And in a time when so many young people are told they need to be sure of who they are, Joshua reminds us that it's okay to just be. Think Joshua Bassett is proof that a single sentence can shift everything? Type "maybe" in the comments if you believe there's power in not knowing yet. Not every story needs a headline. Some are told in glances, gestures, and quiet vibes. These stars may never confirm a thing, and that's okay. Their silence speaks volumes. For the queer community, even unspoken visibility can be powerful. Think one of them is almost there? Drop a name below and type "almost" if you live for mystery. Like, subscribe, and follow LGBTQ+ vibes. We see it and we feel it too.
What would it cost to hide who you are for an entire lifetime? In Hollywood, where image is everything, many LGBTQ+ stars wore a mask far heavier than any role they ever played. Some hid their truth to protect their careers. Others never had the chance to come out at all. Share this video and tell us, which of these stories stayed with you the most? Let's bring light to the lives lived in the dark. In the early 1960s, George Maharis was television gold. As the brooding, leather-jacketed star of Route 66, he was adored by audiences and chased by the press. But when he suddenly exited the show at the height of its success, rumors swirled. Health reasons were cited, but insiders knew the truth was far more dangerous for his career. George had been arrested in a gay sex sting, something that could, and nearly did, end everything. Though he continued acting, his star never shone quite the same. For decades, he avoided questions about his personal life, fearing that being open would close every door. He never married, never confirmed, and carefully crafted a neutral image. He passed away in 2023 at age 94. Still widely admired, still closeted in the public eye. George Maharis was a man trapped between two highways, one of fame, the other of freedom, and for him, the two never truly intersected. Best known as the flamboyant Endora on Bewitched, Agnes Moorehead was anything but ordinary. A powerhouse of old Hollywood, she built a career on sharp wit and commanding presence. Yet her personal life remained an enigma. Never married, after a short, troubled union, she was often surrounded by women, close friendships that sparked whispers behind closed doors. Colleagues described her as intensely private, fiercely loyal, and completely uninterested in discussing her romantic life. She was part of a generation of actresses who were allowed to live alone, but never openly queer. Though she denied the rumors, never publicly embracing any label, her life was marked by solitude, discipline, and guarded mystery. Whether by choice or necessity, Agnes mastered the art of deflection in a time when authenticity could end a career overnight. She passed away in 1974, leaving behind a trail of characters larger than life and a personal truth that remained quietly her own. I want to be alone. With those words, Greta Garbo carved her name into cinematic legend, but behind the mystique was a woman who may have meant it more literally than we ever knew. One of Hollywood's most elusive stars, Garbo never married, rarely gave interviews, and retired from acting at the height of her fame. Whispers about her relationships with women, most notably playwright Mercedes de Acosta, have lingered for decades, supported by love letters, poems, and diary entries. But Garbo never confirmed anything. She chose seclusion over scrutiny and spent the last 50 years of her life walking Manhattan in oversized sunglasses, avoiding the world that once adored her. Whether she hid to protect her heart or her image, one thing is certain. The price of mystery was loneliness. Greta was not just an enigma to the public. She may have remained one even to herself. You may not know his name, but you definitely know his work. Henry Wilson was the Hollywood talent agent behind some of the most iconic leading men of the 1950s. Rock Hudson, Tab Hunter, Troy Donahue. He crafted their images, renamed them, and in many cases, carefully orchestrated their public romances. But Henry himself was a gay man working from the shadows, spinning lies to protect his clients and himself. As the man who sold straight fantasies to a very straight world, he was both puppet master and prisoner. His power faded quickly, and by the 1970s, he was broke, blacklisted, and dying of cirrhosis in a shabby apartment. The man who built beautiful illusions died surrounded by none of them. Henry's story is not just one of secrecy. It is a chilling reminder of what happens when you sell dreams but never dare to live your own. Tyler Perry built an empire from scratch, writing, directing, and acting his way to the top of Hollywood's power list. But while his movies often focus on family, faith, and identity, his own story remains carefully guarded. For years, rumors about his sexuality have followed him. Persistent and unrelenting, Perry has consistently denied being gay, sometimes dismissing the speculation as distractions from his work. Still, the conversations persist, especially as he continues to remain single and private. He rarely appears publicly with romantic partners and never addresses personal matters beyond surface-level interviews. While he has given millions a voice through his films, some wonder if he has ever truly found the space to live openly himself. Whether his silence is self-preservation or strategic branding, it reflects a lingering reality. Even in 21st century Hollywood, being rich, famous, and black may still not be enough to live out loud. Long before the word lesbian could be spoken aloud in Hollywood boardrooms, Dorothy Arzner was directing films, and doing it better than most men. The only female director in the 1930s working for major studios, Dorothy dressed in suits, lived with her partner Marion Morgan, and surrounded herself with strong women. Yet she never discussed her private life in public. She used her influence to lift other women, mentor young talents, and tell stories from a perspective the world didn't yet understand. Her success was groundbreaking, but her silence was strategic. Hollywood could tolerate her power, barely, but not her truth. She eventually left the industry, retreating into academia and private life. Dorothy's legacy paved the way for generations, but she paid a high price: visibility without personal freedom. She lived boldly but quietly behind the camera and behind the veil. She was strong, smart, and always a step ahead of her male co-stars. Barbara Stanwyck lit up Hollywood's golden age, playing powerful women who never needed saving. But the woman behind the roles was far more complex. Rumors of her relationships with women circulated for decades, yet Barbara never confirmed anything publicly. She married and divorced, kept a tight circle, and guarded her privacy with near-military precision. Close friends hinted at long-term female companionships, but Hollywood's unspoken rule of silence kept everything off the record. She lived and died as a fiercely independent woman, but also, perhaps, as someone who never felt safe enough to live her truth out loud. In her case, power and loneliness walked hand in hand. a bittersweet reminder that even the strongest stars sometimes carry the heaviest secrets. To the world, Tab Hunter was the all-American boy. Blonde hair, blue eyes, and box office gold. He dated starlets, graced magazine covers, and made teenage hearts race. But behind the polished smile was a man living in constant fear. Tab was gay, and in the 1950s, that could destroy everything. Studio executives arranged fake relationships and gossip columns printed what they were paid to print. Meanwhile, Tab fell in love with figure skater Ronnie Robertson and later with actor Anthony Perkins, but both romances were hidden from the world. It wasn't until 2005 in his memoir Tab Hunter Confidential that he finally told his truth. By then, the spotlight had long faded, but the weight had finally lifted. Tab's life was a masterclass in image control, but more importantly, in the courage it takes to reclaim your story, even decades too late. If glitter were a person, it would be Liberace. With rhinestone-studded capes, golden pianos, and chandeliers on stage, he was the king of showmanship. But for all his flamboyance, Liberace spent his life denying what the world could already see. He sued newspapers that labeled him gay. He called his lovers roommates, and he crafted a public persona so aggressively heterosexual it bordered on parody. Behind closed doors, however, he lived a very different life, filled with secret romances, lawsuits from former partners, and desperate efforts to keep his truth hidden. In the 1980s, as AIDS ravaged the gay community, Liberace fell ill. He refused to admit his diagnosis until the end. Even in death, he clung to the illusion. His passing in 1987 left fans shocked, not just by the loss, but by the lie they had believed for so long. He was a star who could command a stage, but never his own narrative. She commands stages, red carpets, and screens with confidence, but for much of her career, Queen Latifah has kept one part of her life strictly off limits. While the world speculated about her sexuality for decades, Latifah neither confirmed nor denied, opting instead for privacy that often masked pain. In interviews, she deflected, smiled, and changed the subject. Rumors about her long-term partner, trainer Ebony Nichols, lingered for years but were never publicly acknowledged. And while Latifah has become more openly supportive of LGBTQ+ causes, she only referred to her partner publicly for the first time in 2021, decades after she first hit the charts. Whether out of self-protection or industry pressure, her silence spoke volumes about the dangers Black queer women still face in entertainment. Her legacy is legendary, but her journey, like many others, has been shaped by the quiet cost of keeping love in the shadows. She was just 12 when she stunned the world in Taxi Driver, and she has been in the spotlight ever since. But for most of her life, Jodie Foster avoided any mention of her sexuality. Fiercely private, she built a wall between her public persona and personal truth, one that even her Oscars and box office success could not tear down. In interviews, she joked, dodged, or simply refused to answer questions about her love life. Her silence was not shame. It was survival in an industry where openness could mean exile. It wasn't until the 2013 Golden Globes that she finally acknowledged her long-term partner in a speech that was emotional, cryptic, and deeply human. It was not a grand reveal, but a quiet declaration of exhaustion and honesty. Jodie's journey was not about coming out to us. It was about finally stepping into her own light after decades of hiding in the shadows. As one of the most respected journalists in television history, Barbara Walters spent decades asking others to share their deepest secrets while keeping her own under lock and key. Though she never identified as LGBTQ+, whispers followed her for years. Her fiercely close relationships with powerful women, her private nature, and her refusal to remarry all fueled speculation. But Barbara knew how the media worked. After all, she helped shape it. She never gave gossip columns the satisfaction of confirmation. Instead, she focused on breaking barriers in broadcast journalism while sidestepping questions about her own identity. Whether the rumors were true or not, Barbara's silence reveals a telling truth. Even the most powerful women in media could not always afford to be fully seen. In her case, control over the narrative was everything, and that control came at the cost of personal transparency. Few names stir more fascination than Tom Cruise. A box office titan, a global icon, and a mystery wrapped in a $1 million smile. But behind the carefully curated image lies a cloud of questions that has followed him for decades. Despite high-profile marriages and endless press coverage, Cruise's private life has remained tightly controlled. Speculation about his sexuality has persisted since the 1990s, fueled by tabloid headlines, legal threats, and his fierce allegiance to Scientology, a group known for its rigid views on identity. He has never publicly addressed the rumors, and perhaps never will. But in a world that demands transparency from its stars, Tom's silence feels deafening. Whether rooted in belief, branding, or fear, his guarded life reminds us that even at the top, authenticity can feel too risky. The spotlight may adore him, but it has never truly touched the man beneath the legend. He was the quiet constant of classic Hollywood, a child actor turned character star who seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Roddy McDowall never married, rarely spoke about his personal life, and carefully avoided controversy. But those who knew him best understood. Roddy was a gay man living within the strict, unspoken code of the studio system. He was beloved by peers, respected by directors, and trusted as a confidant, precisely because he never stepped out of line. He took friendships seriously, chose privacy over provocation, and never allowed the press a glimpse of his heart. When he died in 1998, he left behind a legacy of grace and discretion. Roddy never hid with bitterness. He simply lived with discipline. But in his restraint, we see the tragic cost of a generation who could only be loved if they were never fully known. He was the embodiment of masculinity on screen, the tall, rugged heartthrob who defined 1950s cinema. Rock Hudson kissed Doris Day, led epic romances, and charmed millions. But behind the carefully curated image, he lived a double life that nearly destroyed him. His homosexuality was an open secret in elite circles, yet studio contracts and publicists crafted an illusion so perfect, even rock began to disappear behind it. He married his agent's secretary in a publicity stunt that fooled no one close to him. His real relationships, private, quiet, and hidden, took place far from the cameras. When he was diagnosed with AIDS in the 1980s, his silence ended not by choice, but by necessity. His illness became the world's wake-up call to a growing crisis, and finally his truth was known. But it came too late. Rock Hudson died a legend, yes, but also a man robbed of the chance to ever live fully as himself. Chav 16, Montgomery Clift. His face was flawless, his talent undeniable, but Montgomery Clift's life was a slow unraveling behind the scenes. A contemporary of Brando and Dean, Clift redefined male vulnerability on screen. But off-screen, he wrestled with demons he could not name in public. As a closeted gay man in 1950s Hollywood, Monty lived in constant fear of exposure. After a near-fatal car crash in 1956, his pain deepened, physically and emotionally. He became reclusive, dependent on pills and alcohol, and by the time of his death in 1966, he had isolated himself from nearly everyone. Though beloved by co-stars, his personal life was carefully erased from the press. His performances were raw, intimate, unforgettable, and perhaps unknowingly autobiographical. Montgomery Clift gave everything to his craft, but never had the freedom to give the same honesty to his own life. With his razor-sharp wit and unforgettable voice, Paul Lynde was a comedic powerhouse. He lit up Hollywood squares and stole scenes in every sitcom he touched. But behind the laughter was a man haunted by insecurity and silence. Paul was gay, flamboyantly so in private circles, but never acknowledged it publicly. The 1970s weren't kind to campy gay men in Hollywood, and his career often stalled when producers deemed him too much. He masked loneliness with jokes and masked pain with vodka. Though adored by fans, he never found lasting love or safety in being out. He died alone in 1982, with no partner by his side. Paul Lynde made millions laugh, yet spent his life hiding from the very truth that gave his humor its sparkle. He lived in a closet full of applause, never knowing how it felt to open the door. Sal Mineo broke hearts in Rebel Without a Cause, earning an Oscar nomination at just 17. But his career, unlike his co-stars, never soared. As whispers of his sexuality grew louder in the 1960s, roles grew scarce. Hollywood had no space for openly gay men, not even one as talented as Sal. He turned to theater, took smaller parts, and quietly embraced his identity in private. Just as he began rebuilding momentum in the late 1970s, he was murdered outside his apartment in a senseless act of violence. The press focused on the crime, not the man. Rarely did they mention the weight he carried just to live authentically. Sal Mineo died young, but not before giving the world glimpses of who he truly was, in both his art and the quiet resistance of living his truth, even when it cost him everything. Audiences knew him as the unshakable Perry Mason, a legal mind with a granite stare and a voice that commanded any courtroom. But off-camera, Raymond Burr lived a very different truth. For decades, he fabricated stories of wives who never existed, even inventing a tragic child who died young. The truth, Raymond was gay and lived most of his adult life with his partner, Robert Benavides. But to preserve his career during the rigid 1950s and 60s, he rewrote his own life for the press. Even after his death in 1993, official biographies still hesitated to acknowledge Robert's role in his life. Raymond didn't just act on screen, he acted in life, every single day. His legacy is not just one of courtroom drama, but of quiet endurance in a world that left no room for men like him to love openly. Best known as Mel Cooley on The Dick Van Dyke Show, Richard Deacon was a familiar face in American households, witty, mild-mannered, and beloved. Yet off-screen, he lived a carefully concealed life. Never married, rarely photographed outside of work, and absent from gossip columns, Deacon maintained his privacy with military precision. Those close to him knew he was gay, but the public never did. He was a steady working actor in an era where being out meant no work at all. So he kept quiet, stayed polite, and kept acting. When he passed in 1984, there were tributes to his humor, his professionalism, but none to his truth. Richard Deacon was not a headline maker, but he was part of a silent generation who built the entertainment we love today, while quietly sacrificing the right to be themselves within it. They lived for applause, but longed for honesty. These were not just stars, they were human beings who carried their truth in silence. Let us honor them not for the roles they played, but for the courage they never got to show. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to support more stories that deserve the light. Your voice keeps their memory alive.
Behind the fame lies a truth few dare to speak. These 15 black celebrities did not just raise children, they stood up for them, even when the world looked away. From quiet revelations to bold declarations, their stories will surprise you. Think you know which comedy legend changed stand-up forever in the 1970s? Stick around. This is LGBTQ+ Vibes, where truth shines brighter than fame. Like, comment, and let's begin. He was the voice of raw, unfiltered comedy, an icon who tore through taboos with a mic in hand. But behind Richard Pryor's explosive stage presence and groundbreaking routines was a personal life full of chaos, complexity, and contradiction. Offstage, he battled addiction, unstable relationships, and the heavy weight of fame. Among his 7 children, one would grow to carry not just his name, but also his fire. Rain Pryor, born into the whirlwind of celebrity and controversy, would become a figure of truth in an industry built on illusion. As the daughter of a legend, Rain Pryor grew up with a last name that opened doors, but came with expectations she never asked for. While she followed her father's footsteps into the entertainment world, as an actress and comedian, it was her own moment of truth in 1995 that redefined her public identity. At age 26, Rain came out as bisexual, in a time when the visibility of LGBTQ+ children of black celebrities was nearly non-existent. The catalyst? A few candid photos surfaced of Rain sharing affectionate moments with a woman, but instead of hiding or deflecting, she chose courage. Rain addressed the speculation head-on, speaking her truth not only for herself, but for others who had never seen someone like her do it first. Her coming out was not just a headline, it was a declaration of independence. Rain Pryor didn't want to live under anyone's expectations, not the entertainment industry's, not society's, and not even those linked to her legendary family name. She went on to use her experience as a platform, writing a powerful memoir, Jokes My Father Never Taught Me, where she laid bare the layers of race, identity, legacy, and love. Rain's story is one of quiet rebellion and radical authenticity. And in living her truth, she showed the world that being a prior meant more than punchlines. It meant having the guts to stand alone in your truth, even when the spotlight burns. In 2019, Marlon Wayans made headlines, not for a movie but for something far more meaningful. The comedy star behind hits like Scary Movie and White Chicks posted a simple photo of his daughter, Amai Zachary Wayans, wearing rainbow-themed sneakers. But it was the caption that resonated. Happy Pride to my pride and joy. I wouldn't change one effing thing about you. Love you to the moon, around the sun, through the galaxies, and back again. With that message, Marlon publicly celebrated Amai, who had come out as a lesbian, and in doing so became a symbol of unconditional love in a world that still struggles with acceptance. Amai had privately embraced her identity earlier, choosing to live authentically outside the glare of Hollywood. But her father's public show of support elevated her visibility, especially within the Black community, where conversations about sexuality are often more guarded. As the daughter of a major comedy figure, Amai's quiet strength and her father's loud pride sparked national conversation. It was not just about identity, it was about how love should look, bold, unapologetic, and unwavering. Marlon's post was shared across platforms, praised by allies, activists, and fans who saw in it something rare, a Black father loudly affirming his queer daughter. In interviews that followed, Marlon said he was learning from his daughter's courage every day. Parental love must come without conditions or judgment, he emphasized. And in standing by Amai, he helped shift the narrative about fatherhood, masculinity, and support in modern America. Their story is not only about coming out, it is about stepping up. Marlon Wayans did not just accept his daughter's truth, he lifted it up for the world to see. And that act, simple yet powerful, reminded us all that true strength begins at home. Dwyane Wade is known around the world for his championship rings, highlight reel plays, and legendary NBA career. But in 2020, he earned a different kind of respect, not for what he did on the court, but for how he showed up off it. That year, at just 12 years old, his daughter Zaya Wade courageously came out as transgender. While most families might have handled that privately, the Wades made a bold choice. They opened up their journey to the world, showing millions what support, learning, and unconditional love truly look like. Zaya's revelation did not come out of nowhere. It followed months of heartfelt conversations within the family, moments filled with questions, tears, understanding, and growth. Dwyane, alongside his wife Gabrielle Union, didn't shy away from the spotlight or the scrutiny. Instead, they used their platform to advocate for their daughter's right to live freely and authentically. Dwyane appeared on national television, openly discussing how he had to educate himself, seek guidance, and listen, really listen, to his child. My job as a father is to facilitate her journey, not dictate it, he said. In a world where Black masculinity often leaves little room for tenderness or emotional nuance, Wade redefined strength on his own terms. Zaya quickly became a beacon of hope for transgender youth across the globe. With poise beyond her years, she began attending red carpet events, speaking on platforms, and simply being herself, unapologetically. Meanwhile, her father stood firmly beside her, shutting down critics and lifting up a new generation of families learning how to love better. For Dwyane Wade, the titles, trophies, and Olympic medals matter. But helping his daughter thrive in her truth, that may just be the most meaningful victory of his life. Magic Johnson dominated the NBA with charisma, vision, and an unstoppable energy that transformed the game. But perhaps his most powerful legacy did not happen on the hardwood. It unfolded in how he stood by his son, E.J. Johnson, in a time when that kind of love was anything but guaranteed. In 2013, at just 20 years old, EJ was photographed holding hands with another man in Beverly Hills. The media went wild. Headlines exploded. Speculation surged. But what caught the world's attention more than the gossip was the way Magic responded. Instead of hiding or distancing himself, as so many public figures have, Magic embraced his son publicly and proudly. He told reporters what mattered most. "We are going to love you no matter who you are or what you do." That single statement sent a ripple through the sports world, where being gay, especially as a black man, was still weighed down by stigma and silence. Magic made it clear, there was no shame here. There was only family, only love. It was a moment of visibility that challenged not just the culture of basketball, but broader conversations around black fatherhood and LGBTQ+ acceptance. Since coming out, EJ Johnson has stepped fully into his light. With his bold fashion, gender-fluid style, and sharp confidence, he has become a symbol of self-expression and freedom. Whether on reality television or in fashion circles, EJ defies every box society tries to place him in. And through it all, Magic Johnson has remained his biggest supporter, beaming with pride and using his platform to encourage others to do the same. Because real greatness is not just about championships, it is about standing tall, not just on the court, but beside your child when the world is watching. Isaiah Thomas earned his place in NBA history with heart, grit, and fearless determination. As the leader of the Detroit Pistons during their back-to-back championship years, he was known for being relentless on the court and fiercely loyal to his teammates. But away from the game, another legacy was quietly unfolding. One not built on basketball stats, but on love, resilience, and quiet strength. That legacy lives through his son, Zeke Thomas, a DJ, public speaker, and proud gay man who has become a powerful voice in the LGBTQ+ community. Zeke chose a very different path from his father's. While Isaiah ruled the hardwood, Zeke found his rhythm in music and advocacy. He came out as gay early in adulthood, and rather than stepping back from the spotlight, he used his platform to educate, empower, and inspire. But in 2017, Zeke revealed something even deeper: that he had survived a sexual assault at a private event in Los Angeles. His decision to speak publicly about such a deeply personal trauma was rare, especially as a black gay man in America. Zeke refused to stay silent. Instead, he became an advocate for survivors, breaking through layers of stigma to make space for healing. Throughout Zeke's journey, his father stood beside him, quietly but firmly. While Isaiah Thomas rarely discussed family matters publicly, Zeke often spoke of the unwavering love and support he felt at home. It was not always loud, but it was always there. And in a world that often demands men be stoic or detached, Isaiah's quiet support sent a message just as powerful as any public statement. Real fathers do not need applause to stand by their children. They just do it, with dignity, with pride, and with love that never wavers. Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith are no strangers to the spotlight. As one of Hollywood's most iconic couples, they've built careers spanning music, film, and television, while raising a family under constant public scrutiny. But amid their success, one of their most powerful moments came not from a red carpet appearance or box office hit. It came from their daughter, Willow Smith, speaking her truth. Known for her breakout single, "Whip My Hair," Willow had long defied convention with her art and style. But in 2021, she took things a step further, publicly coming out as bisexual and expressing openness to polyamorous relationships. It happened during a deeply personal episode of Red Table Talk, the family's now famous platform for open, raw conversations. Sitting across from her mother and grandmother, Willow revealed that she values emotional connection beyond traditional romantic boundaries. Her words were direct, honest, and delivered with a calm bravery that struck millions. "I love men and women equally," she said, explaining her attraction to people rather than labels. The admission was both groundbreaking and risky, especially as the daughter of two globally recognized stars. The internet lit up. Some praised her for her honesty. Others criticized and questioned. But what mattered most was how her parents responded. Will and Jada didn't flinch. They stood by their daughter completely, using their platform to reinforce one simple truth: love is unconditional. Their support offered something rare, a public model of Black parental love that embraced identity in all its forms. While Willow continued evolving as an artist and public thinker, her story became more than just about sexuality. It was about self-definition, about courage, about challenging the rules of fame, family, and identity, all at once. And through it all, her parents didn't just support from behind, they stood beside her, every step of the way. For years, Robert Sylvester Kelly was considered one of the biggest names in R&B, with a catalog of hits that shaped a generation. But behind the stage lights and chart-topping success, a very different story unfolded within his own family, one that had nothing to do with fame and everything to do with identity. In 2014, his then 14-year-old child made a deeply personal revelation. Jay Kelly came out as a transgender boy. The announcement, made through social media, was met with both praise and criticism, as Jay stepped into the public eye to live as his true self. Jay's journey was never about spectacle. It was about truth. From an early age, he had shown bold individuality and a sense of self that pushed against society's expectations. But coming out publicly, especially at such a young age and as the child of a high-profile figure, came with intense pressure. While many admired Jay's bravery, others responded with confusion, ignorance, or even hostility. Reflections of a world still learning how to respect and support transgender youth. Jay began attending events, speaking openly, and sharing his life as Robert Sylvester Kelly's son, not the daughter the world once thought they knew. Through it all, he stayed firm in his identity, refusing to let the noise shake his foundation. Sadly, the support Jay needed most did not fully come from within his own family. Robert Sylvester Kelly's public response was distant, vague acknowledgments, no strong affirmation. It was a painful absence that spoke volumes. And yet, Jay continued forward, drawing strength not from his father's approval, but from his own resolve. He became a quiet but powerful figure of inspiration, especially for young transgender individuals navigating similar paths. His story reminds us that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is choose yourself, even when the people closest to you cannot. And in doing so, Jay Kelly became a symbol of resilience far greater than any last name. Cynthia Bailey built her reputation in front of cameras, first as a model, then as a beloved star of The Real Housewives of Atlanta. Known for her poise, elegance, and grace under pressure, she handled fame like a seasoned pro. But it was off-screen, in a quiet, deeply personal moment with her daughter Noelle Robinson, that Cynthia showed the world what strength and love truly look like. In 2019, during a candid episode of the show, Noelle shared with her mother and millions of viewers that she identifies as sexually fluid. There was no dramatic buildup, no media frenzy, just a heartfelt conversation in a car, where Noelle explained that she was attracted to people, not genders. Her words were thoughtful, sincere, and deeply honest. "It really just came out of nowhere," she said. "I just wasn't expecting to fall for a girl." What made that moment so powerful was not just Noelle's courage, it was Cynthia's immediate and unwavering response. "If you meet an amazing young lady, that's a blessing," she said without hesitation. That one sentence, so simple yet so full of love, resonated across communities where acceptance is often withheld or delayed. Cynthia's support for Noelle became a quiet revolution in itself. As a public figure, she used her platform not for drama, but for affirmation. She showed viewers that love does not need to be loud to be life-changing. For Noelle, that support meant everything. She continued exploring her identity with confidence, and her openness inspired a wave of young people to live more authentically. In a culture where labels often divide and expectations weigh heavy, the Robinson Bailey story stood out. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. A mother listened. A daughter spoke her truth. And together, they showed millions how powerful acceptance can be. Michael Jordan's name is synonymous with greatness. With 6 NBA championships, global fame, and a legacy that transcends basketball, he is often seen as the very definition of perfection under pressure. But in 2023, the world caught a glimpse of another kind of strength, one rooted not in athletic domination but in quiet, powerful support. That year, his daughter Jasmine Jordan publicly came out as a lesbian, confirming what those closest to her had known and accepted long before. Her truth became public at a fashion event in New York City, where she appeared confidently with her partner by her side, sparking headlines and conversations across social media. For Jasmine, the moment was not about making a statement. It was about no longer hiding. In a heartfelt public post, she wrote, "I'm done hiding. It's time to live my truth." Those words, simple yet profound, echoed far beyond the fashion world. They spoke to young LGBTQ+ people who had been waiting for someone like Jasmine, someone from a family of legends, to show them that authenticity matters more than legacy. Coming from the daughter of one of the most revered athletes in history, her message hit differently. It was not just a personal victory. It was a cultural moment, especially in communities where silence around sexuality still lingers. Michael Jordan, often seen as intensely private and emotionally reserved, did not rush to the spotlight with statements or interviews. But behind the scenes, he reached out to trusted friends, quietly seeking guidance on how to best support his daughter. And when it mattered most, his stance was crystal clear. Unconditional love, unwavering pride. For Jasmine, that support gave her the space to stand tall in her identity. And for the rest of us, it offered a reminder that real legacy is not just measured in titles and trophies. It is measured in how you show up when the world is watching, and how you love when no one else knows what to say. Carrie Payton is best known for giving voice to heroes. Whether as the brave Ezekiel in The Walking Dead or the iconic Cyborg in Teen Titans Go, he has spent years breathing life into characters who stand strong in the face of adversity. But his most powerful role was not scripted. It was deeply personal. In 2020, Carrie took to social media to introduce his son Carter to the world, a moment that was not about fame, but about truth, pride, and love. "This is my kid," he wrote, "one of the most happy, well-adjusted individuals I've ever known. My son, Carter." With those few words, Carrie joined a growing chorus of parents choosing love over fear, support over silence. Carter, a transgender boy, had chosen his name and identity himself. There was no press tour, no flashy headline, just a father honoring his child's truth with the kind of quiet dignity that speaks louder than any Hollywood storyline. What made the moment even more powerful was its simplicity. Carrie did not frame Carter's identity as a challenge or a burden. He celebrated it as a joy. And by sharing it publicly, he offered a powerful model of what unconditional acceptance looks like. Not just for fans, but for families everywhere. Especially in Black communities where discussions around gender identity can still be met with resistance or misunderstanding. The Paytons' story may not have made front-page news, but its impact ran deep. Carrie used his platform not for attention, but for visibility, at a time when transgender youth are too often misunderstood or ignored. His post became a quiet revolution, a reminder that parenting is not about molding a child into someone they are not. It is about protecting who they already are. Carter's journey continues, and Carrie stands proudly by his side. Because sometimes, the most heroic thing you can do is show up for your child, without conditions, without fear, and with love that speaks volumes even in silence. Coco Clemens, the powerhouse voice behind the R&B group SWV, helped define the sound of the 1990s. With hits like Weak and Rain, she captivated millions with her vocal range and raw emotion. But behind the stage lights and soulful melodies, Coco faced one of life's most profound and personal journeys, supporting her son Jalen Clemens as he embraced his identity within the LGBTQ+ community. Long before any formal announcement, Jalen caught public attention for his fearless fashion and expressive individuality. With bold choices and unapologetic presence, he challenged traditional gender norms in every appearance. For years, fans speculated about Jalen's identity, but he did not rush to explain himself. He lived visibly and boldly, not for approval, but because that was who he was. Then, in 2016, he publicly confirmed that he identified as part of the LGBTQ+ community. The response from his mother was immediate and full of warmth. Coco did not flinch or hesitate. She called her son a blessing and made it clear in interviews and social media posts that her love for him was unwavering. In an industry where such affirmations are still far too rare, especially from figures with strong ties to faith, her stance was both powerful and refreshing. Jalen's decision to live openly was more than just a personal milestone. It became a message of empowerment to others walking a similar path. And Coco's public embrace of her son offered hope to parents everywhere who might still be learning how to respond. Their story is not just about music or identity, it is about faith, family, and fierce love. In showing that faith and LGBTQ+ acceptance can coexist, Coco Clemens delivered a message louder than any chart-topping song. That real love does not come with conditions. It comes with open arms, proud words, and the courage to stand together. Sade Adu has always been a mystery. With her velvety voice and timeless hits like Smooth Operator and No Ordinary Love, she built a legacy of elegance, privacy, and quiet power. Rarely giving interviews and fiercely guarding her personal life, Sade seemed untouchable, a figure of cool distance in an industry obsessed with exposure. But when her child, Isaac Theo Adu, came out as a transgender man, that protective silence transformed into something far more profound. A quiet, unshakable act of love. Isaac began transitioning in 2016, slowly sharing his journey with the world through thoughtful posts on social media. He never chased the spotlight, only authenticity. And in 2019, following gender confirmation surgery, he posted a heartfelt message to the person who had stood by him from the beginning. "Thank you for staying by my side these past 6 months, Mama." That simple sentence said it all. Sade had never been one to issue press releases or social statements, but through her presence, her consistency, and her love, she supported her son every step of the way. No cameras, no applause, just quiet, unwavering strength. In a world where transgender youth often face rejection, and in communities of color where acceptance is still evolving, Sade's role as a loving, affirming parent carried enormous weight. She may never have shouted her support from a stage, but through Isaac's words and confidence, the message was clear. She showed up, fully, faithfully, and without hesitation. Today, Isaac is a vocal advocate for trans rights, using his experience to inspire others. And through him, Sade's legacy extends beyond music. It is a legacy of courage, compassion, and love that does not need to be loud to be life-changing. In Nigeria, being gay is not just taboo, it is criminalized, condemned, and often met with fear and silence. So when Bolu Akupe, the son of a high-ranking Nigerian political figure, posted a photo of himself holding a rainbow flag on Instagram in January 2021, the world took notice. "Yes, I'm gay," he wrote, unapologetic, clear, and defiant. His father, Dr. Doyin Okupe, had once served as a presidential advisor and was known for his conservative views. The backlash was instant, intense, and often cruel. But Bolu stood firm. In a country where coming out can mean exile or worse, he chose to live his truth. Bolu later explained that he had known he was gay since the age of 10. Though he spent time living in Europe, he clarified that his identity had nothing to do with Western influence. It was simply who he was. The media swarmed with questions, assumptions, and political commentary. But Bolu refused to be politicized. He was not trying to make a statement for his father's sake. He was making one for himself and for the many young Nigerians hiding in fear. His boldness cracked open a door that had long been sealed shut in Nigeria's national discourse on LGBTQ+ rights. And whether the public was ready or not, Bolu was. Today, Bolu Akupe continues to live abroad, using his platform to advocate for equality and visibility. He speaks out not just for himself, but for a generation silenced by shame. He dreams of having children one day, a simple wish wrapped in extraordinary courage. And though his relationship with his father has been complicated, it is Bolu's story, his voice, his fight, his refusal to shrink, that is reshaping the future. In a world that often punishes those who live honestly, Bolu Akupe chose pride. And by doing so, he lit a path for others still trying to find their way out of the shadows. Every name on this list reminds us of one thing. Love is louder than fear. These stars did more than support their LGBTQ+ children. They changed what it means to be a parent in the spotlight. Which story moved you most? Drop it in the comments, and if you believe in visibility, truth, and fierce family pride, subscribe to LGBTQ+ Vibes and share this message far and wide. Because this is not just a video, it is a movement. What if the most captivating women in Hollywood were not only stunning and talented, but also brave enough to live their truth? In a world where image is everything, these 25 actresses shattered expectations and redefined what it means to be seen. From red carpets to raw confessions, their journeys are bold, beautiful, and unapologetically real. If any of these stories move you, hit like, drop a comment, and don't forget to subscribe for more fearless icons. Now, let's dive into the 25 most dazzling and powerful LGBTQ+ actresses redefining fame in their own way. Before she became a global icon, Angelina Jolie was already setting fire to every rule Hollywood had written about how a woman should look, love, and live. With her piercing eyes, unapologetic tattoos, and unpredictable soul, she captivated not just cameras, but the world. She was fierce, messy, magnetic, and beneath the surface of every red carpet moment was someone completely uninterested in fitting in. At a time when actresses were expected to be silent and polished, Angelina was raw and loud, in the most beautiful way. Her truth broke through in a way few dared to imagine. Jolie openly admitted she had fallen deeply in love with model Jenny Shimizu, even saying she would have married her if things had worked out. This was not gossip. This was her, on the record, back when being openly queer could cost you roles, endorsements, and your place in the industry. But Angelina did not care. She never boxed her desires, never apologized for who she was drawn to. Her bisexuality was not a phase, and it was never hidden behind whispers. It was powerfully, defiantly real. What makes her story unforgettable is not just that she loved freely, but that she did so while standing under the brightest spotlight in the world. She showed millions that embracing your truth does not dim your light, it makes you shine harder. And in an era where queer stories are still being silenced around the world, Angelina's early truth still echoes as a reminder. Being yourself is never the wrong role to play. And if that gave you chills, the next name on this list might just light a fire. She did not come out with fireworks. She came out like a storm rolling in slowly, quietly, and absolutely unstoppable. Kristen Stewart, once known to the world as the mysterious Bella Swan, spent years under the spotlight of a global obsession she never asked for. But behind the reserved glances and quiet interviews was someone wrestling with something deeper than fame, the pressure to live a life that was never truly hers. Hollywood wanted a straight, perfect, girl-next-door heroine. Kristen, however, was never built for that mold. After her high-profile split from Robert Pattinson, she stepped off the pedestal and into her truth. She began dating women, not with fanfare, but with honesty. No grand statements, no PR rollouts, just Kristen, walking hand in hand with her girlfriends, unapologetically herself. She once said in an interview, "I was so nervous to be like, I'm not hiding anything." And in that simple line, she gave voice to countless people navigating the gray areas of identity. She showed us that authenticity is not always loud. Sometimes it is a quiet, steady rebellion. Today, Kristen Stewart is more than an actress. She is an artist, a director, and a symbol of what happens when you stop playing the part others wrote for you. Her queerness is not just a part of her. It is woven into her craft, her presence, and her power. And just when you thought Kristen rewrote the rules, wait until you meet the woman who laughed in their faces while turning the fashion world upside down. She walked onto the runway like she owned the world. And maybe she did. Cara Delevingne was not just another pretty face in fashion. With her bold brows, devil-may-care smirk, and a strut that dared you to look away, she redefined what beauty looked like. But behind the flashing cameras and couture gowns was a young woman questioning everything, especially the expectations placed on her by the world. She never wanted to be anyone's fantasy. She wanted to be real. Cara came out as pansexual with the same energy she brings to everything. Unapologetic, raw, and deeply human. She spoke about loving the soul, not the gender, and opened up about her battles with depression, identity, and the pressure to perform. In a world obsessed with labels, Cara tossed them aside and chose freedom. Her relationships, from Michelle Rodriguez to Ashley Benson, were not publicity stunts, but chapters in her search for something authentic. She let the world watch her fall in love, and more importantly, watch her evolve. Now, whether she is acting in major films or speaking out about mental health, Cara brings her whole self to the table. She is messy, she is magnetic, she is magnificent, and in embracing every wild, imperfect part of herself, she has given millions the courage to do the same. Which of these three icons has surprised or inspired you the most so far? Drop their name in the comments. And stick around, because the next woman brings a fire all her own. In 2016, Amber Rose walked onto the stage at her own slut walk and declared into the mic, "I am a bisexual woman, and I'm done hiding." For anyone who had ever judged her, labeled her, or underestimated her, that was the moment the game changed. Amber did not come out in a quiet interview or a subtle Instagram post. She did it in front of a roaring crowd with unapologetic boldness, turning her truth into a movement. Before that moment, the world mostly knew Amber as the glamorous model, music video star, and controversial ex of Kanye West and Wiz Khalifa. Her body, her looks, her sex appeal, that is what the headlines focused on. But underneath the gloss was a woman who had always lived on her own terms. Amber had been dropping clues for years, speaking about loving women, posting photos with partners of different genders, but it was that single declaration at Slutwalk that fully defined her power. Not just as a sex symbol, but as a voice for sexual freedom, identity, and self-respect. Amber Rose is not everyone's idea of a role model, and that is exactly why she matters. She is raw, she is messy, she is electric, and she uses every platform she touches to tell people, especially women and queer people, that they are allowed to be loud, to be complicated, to be themselves. And speaking of magnetic energy, the next woman on our list might just be Hollywood's most unexpected firecracker. I'm actually pansexual, and I didn't know that. Someone explained to me what that is, and I was like, oh, that's me. That quote came straight from Bella Thorne's heart during an interview in 2019, and like everything else in her life, it was unfiltered, honest, and loud. For Bella, labels were never about boxes, they were about clarity. And as someone who has grown up entirely in front of the camera, finding clarity took guts. From Disney darling to boundary-breaking bombshell, Bella Thorne's transformation has been anything but ordinary. She came out as bisexual in 2016, shaking off her squeaky clean image with a simple tweet, and the internet erupted. But that was only the beginning. As the years passed, Bella explored her identity openly, sometimes clumsily, but always authentically. Her pansexuality, her relationships with men, women, and non-binary individuals all became part of her public evolution. And while tabloids loved the chaos, what stood out was her willingness to own it all. Bella never asked for permission. She made mistakes, she went viral, she got judged, but through it all she remained herself, fierce, fluid, and fearless. She is not just a Gen Z sex symbol, she is a mirror for a generation learning to love beyond labels. And coming up next, we meet a woman who took that same defiance and turned it into something even deeper. In 2021, after years of pain, pressure, and public breakdowns, Demi Lovato shaved their head and everything changed. It was not just a haircut, it was liberation. After surviving addiction, overdoses, and the crushing weight of fame, Demi stood in front of the mirror and stripped away everything that was not real. What remained was someone unafraid to be seen, as queer, as fluid, as human. Demi's journey with identity has never been simple. For years, rumors swirled about their relationships with women, whispers the tabloids turned into clickbait. But it was not until after their powerful documentary Dancing with the Devil that Demi truly opened up. They spoke about being attracted to people of all genders, about not fitting into a binary world. For a former Disney star raised to be America's sweetheart, this was a revolution. Demi did not just come out, they exploded out of the mold the industry built around them. Today, Demi Lovato is no longer trying to please anyone. Their voice, once just a powerhouse for pop hits, has become a rallying cry for mental health, queer rights, and personal truth. They have shown the world that healing is messy, that identity is layered, and that self-love takes work. And if Demi's raw courage moved you, the next woman on our list did something just as bold, but in a way only she could. She never made a big announcement. Instead, she dropped a lyric that sent the internet spinning. In 2019, Ariana Grande released her hit song Monopoly with the line, "I like women and men." No press release, no grand reveal, just a casual, confident declaration wrapped in a pop melody. And for fans around the world, it spoke volumes. Ariana had always been about love. Love for herself, love for others, love for freedom. And this line was her way of saying, love does not need an explanation. Ariana is one of the biggest pop stars of her generation, with a voice that could shake stadiums and a style that defines trends. But behind the ponytail and the platinum hits is someone deeply aware of the responsibility that comes with visibility. She has long used her platform to uplift LGBTQ+ voices, performing at pride events, speaking out after tragedies, and making space for her queer fans in every show, every anthem, every moment. Whether or not she fully identifies with a label, her message is crystal clear. Everyone deserves to love who they love, without shame or boundaries. Grande's subtlety is her power. In a world hungry for labels and headlines, she chose ambiguity and turned it into empowerment. Her presence in this conversation reminds us that queerness is not one size fits all, and visibility can take many forms. And coming up next is a woman who never needed subtlety, because from the very beginning, she made it loud and clear. "12 years old, standing in front of the mirror, and already sure of one thing, she liked girls. While most kids that age were still figuring out school crushes, Ruby Rose had already figured out who she was. That kind of clarity is rare. That kind of confidence? Unstoppable. It was never about shocking the world. It was about surviving it, by being unapologetically real from the start. Before Netflix turned her into a global sensation with Orange Is the New Black, Ruby had already built a career in Australia as a model, DJ, and TV presenter. But her true breakout moment was not scripted. It was in how she showed up in every room, fierce, gender-fluid, unapologetically lesbian, and completely unforgettable. While others tested the water, Ruby dove in. She blurred lines, broke expectations, and gave thousands of queer kids a face they could finally see themselves in. Her roles were bold. Her look was bolder. But her message was always the same. Be whoever the hell you are. Ruby Rose proved that queer women could lead shows, front magazines, and change the world, all while staying true to themselves. And now, from fierce defiance to quiet grace, the next woman on this list shows us that coming out can be just as powerful, even when done with a whisper. It started with a photo, one simple, intimate post of her kissing rapper Angel Hayes. In 2014, Ireland Baldwin hit upload, and the internet lit up. For some, it was shocking. For her, it was simply real. The daughter of Hollywood royalty, Ireland had spent her life in the shadow of celebrity. But in that moment, she stepped into the light, not as Alec Baldwin's daughter, but as a woman choosing to love freely and publicly. The relationship with Angel was not long, but it was bold, passionate, and unapologetically queer. Ireland never made a press tour about it. She never needed to. Her message was clear. This is who I am. Take it or leave it. That kind of quiet defiance spoke louder than any headline. In a world still obsessed with labels, she chose fluidity. In an industry that expects perfection, she chose truth, even if it was messy. Today, Ireland Baldwin continues to forge her own path. As a model, as a mother, and as someone who refuses to live under anyone else's narrative. Her queerness is not her brand. It is part of her story, one she tells without filters or edits. And next, we meet a woman who never needed a viral moment, because her legacy was already being written in every powerful role she played. Why would someone so young and beautiful be with someone twice her age? It was the question whispered in tabloids and screamed across comment sections when Sarah Paulson confirmed her relationship with actress Holland Taylor. But while the world obsessed over the age gap, Sarah had already made up her mind. She was in love, and that was the only thing that mattered. In true Sarah fashion, she addressed the chatter with elegance and zero apologies. Sarah Paulson has always danced to her own rhythm. Known for her gripping performances in American Horror Story and Ratched, she commands attention not just with her talent, but with her fearlessness. When she came out, she did not make a spectacle of it. She simply lived openly, refusing to compromise the intimacy of her truth for the comfort of strangers. Her relationship with Holland Taylor is not just romantic, it is revolutionary. In an industry obsessed with youth and image, Sarah chose substance. She chose love over optics. To this day, she continues to challenge expectations in the roles she plays and the life she leads. Sarah Paulson reminds us that visibility does not always have to be loud to be powerful. And coming up next is a woman who, much like Sarah, broke free from expectations, but did so with a burst of youthful rebellion that turned into something much deeper. She played queens on screen, bold, commanding, untouchable. But when Adelaide Kane came out, it was not in front of a throne. It was on TikTok. A short, simple clip in early 2021 where she looked into the camera and said what so many still struggle to say, "I'm bisexual." There were no elaborate speeches or dramatic reveals, just honesty, quiet, and clear. Adelaide had already built a fan base playing royalty in Reign and fierce roles in Teen Wolf and Once Upon a Time. But off-screen, the pressure to live a scripted life had weighed on her. Coming out was not about making headlines. It was about letting go of fear. And once she did, she turned that courage outward. She became a passionate advocate for marriage equality and spoke out about the need for representation in fantasy and period dramas, genres where queer characters are still often erased. What makes Adelaide's story powerful is not just that she came out, but how she did it, with calm, with grace, and with purpose. She reminded fans that your truth does not need to be loud to be revolutionary. And speaking of fierce, quiet revolutions, the next actress on our list has been pushing boundaries in Hollywood long before most even realized it. She did not come out on a red carpet or in a glossy magazine spread. She did it on Capitol Hill. In 2018, Evan Rachel Wood stood before Congress to testify about abuse survival, and in the middle of that raw, harrowing testimony, she said 6 simple words: "I identify as bisexual and gender fluid." It was not a publicity moment. It was a battle cry. Known for her haunting performances in 13 and Westworld, Evan has never played it safe. She came out to the world long before that testimony, but this time it was different. She was not just telling her truth, she was using it to fight for others. For years, she had dropped hints, spoken out, and lived authentically, even when it cost her roles or drew judgment. But that day on Capitol Hill, she turned her pain into purpose and became one of the most powerful queer voices in Hollywood. Evan Rachel Wood is a reminder that being visible is not always about celebration. Sometimes it is about survival. Her story is not just one of identity, but of resilience, and she continues to push the boundaries of what strength and queerness look like. Up next, we meet an actress whose quiet charisma and undeniable presence have made her one of the most effortlessly magnetic women in film today. I'm attracted to men and also to women. If I bring a woman home, my family's not going to say, "Oh, that's strange." With that single statement in a 2018 interview, Tessa Thompson broke the mold, not with drama, but with calm, matter-of-fact honesty. It was not a coming-out performance. It was a reminder. Queerness is not always a secret waiting to explode. Sometimes it is just love, quietly lived, deeply felt, and proudly claimed. Tessa had already become a powerhouse in Hollywood by then, starring in Thor, Westworld, and Creed. But it was her off-screen presence that shifted culture. A rising icon for Black queer visibility, she refused to give in to labels or give up complexity. She talked about fluidity, about loving who you love, and about how society's boxes never quite fit her. Rumors about her relationship with singer Janelle Monáe only amplified the conversation. But Tessa never chased headlines. She chased truth. Today, Tessa Thompson is more than a leading lady. She is a cultural force, a fashion icon, a queer trailblazer, and a woman who reminds us that identity does not have to be simplified to be powerful. And now, get ready for a name you may not hear in headlines every day, but whose story is just as fierce, beautiful, and worthy. What happens when a woman tells her husband, "I'm not straight," and she is still deeply in love with him? That moment, shared by Julianne Hough in a raw 2019 interview, flipped the narrative. Here was a ballroom princess, dancing with the stars' sweetheart, living in a seemingly perfect marriage, suddenly redefining her identity in real time. No drama, no scandal, just a quiet revolution behind closed doors that she chose to share with the world. Julianne's confession was not about rebellion, it was about alignment. Finally, living in step with her inner rhythm. She never used a label. She did not need one. What she offered instead was transparency, a portrait of queerness that coexists with love, marriage, and evolving truth. It was complicated, yes, but it was real. And in a culture obsessed with clarity, she embraced complexity instead. Since then, Julianne has continued to open up, not just about her sexuality, but about her journey towards self-love, spirituality, and embodiment. She dances differently now, freer, more grounded, less choreographed. And if you thought queerness only came wrapped in glitter or defiance, wait until you meet the next woman, who carries hers like a crown of quiet strength. A wedding photo. 2 women. No big headline, no dramatic reveal, just elegance, intimacy, and a quiet kind of pride. When British actress and former model Jessica Clarke married her partner, she did not use it as a statement. And yet, That image alone was revolutionary in an industry still unsure how to handle queerness when it is subtle, unapologetic, and beautiful. Before her acting career took flight, Jessica had already conquered the world of high fashion. With sharp cheekbones and commanding presence, she graced runways and campaigns across Europe. But it was not just her beauty that captivated people, it was her openness. Long before it became common to include pronouns in bios or hashtags like "love is love," Jessica was already out, already proud, and already living freely. After her marriage ended in 2012, she never let heartbreak define her. Instead, she deepened her advocacy, especially for queer women of color navigating visibility in media. Today, Jessica Clarke continues to defy the industry's quiet erasure of lesbian identity. She does not shout for attention, she exists with intention. In every role, every interview, and every bold photo, she reminds us that representation is not about pleasing everyone. It is about telling the truth. And speaking of fearless truth-tellers, the next name on our list gave voice to a Disney legend, and then gave voice to herself. Millions knew her as Moana, brave, radiant, and fearlessly independent. But when Ali Cravalho came out as bisexual in a simple TikTok video, it reminded everyone that even Disney heroines have very real journeys off-screen. No special effects, no ballads, just a girl with a phone answering a fan's question with one word that carried weight: yes. At just 16, Ali became a household name. The pressure that came with voicing an iconic character could have pushed her into silence, into safety. Instead, she leaned into honesty. Her coming out was quiet, no press tour, no confetti, but deeply intentional. She knew exactly what kind of impact it would have. Queer kids, especially young Pacific Islanders, saw someone who looked and sounded like them, simply living her truth. Since then, Ali has continued to break molds. Whether acting, singing, or speaking out, she carries herself with a calm confidence that resonates far beyond her age. She's not trying to be a headline, she's building a legacy, one where authenticity matters more than applause. And now, from a calm presence to a chaotic firecracker, we meet a woman who made queer identity look loud, messy, and wildly unforgettable. What happens when a bisexual, internet-famous, chaos-embracing influencer decides to come out during a feud, in a tweet, and on TikTok? All in the same week? You get Tana Mongeau, and nothing about her story was quiet. She has been called everything: problematic, iconic, unpredictable, raw. But Tana has also been something many others in the spotlight struggled to be: honest. In June 2020, she shared that she was pansexual, attracted to all genders, and she did it the only way she knows how, with flair and very little filter. Her relationships with both men and women have often made headlines, but behind the mess was a young woman discovering herself in real time, with millions watching, judging, and sometimes relating. Tana never claimed to be a role model, but maybe that is what makes her matter. She talks about sexuality the way many actually experience it, as a fluid, imperfect, sometimes confusing process. And in a culture that demands perfection before acceptance, she gave people permission to be messy and proud. And now, let us shift from YouTube drama to a surprising moment of tenderness. When reality TV gave us one of the most groundbreaking queer love stories on primetime. In the middle of a rose-strewn beach set, under the blinding lights of Bachelor in Paradise, Demi Burnett dropped to one knee, not for a man, but for a woman named Christian. In that moment, the long-running reality franchise broke its own mold, and millions of viewers saw something they had never seen before. A queer love story, raw and real, unfolding where no one expected it. Demi had entered the Bachelor universe like any other contestant, flirty, witty, full of fire. But halfway through the season, she opened up about someone waiting for her back home. A woman. When Christian was brought onto the show, it marked the first time the franchise embraced a same-sex romance on screen. There were tears, there was doubt, there was love, honest and unfiltered. Their eventual engagement, though short-lived, became a watershed moment for LGBTQ+ visibility in reality TV. What made Demi's story so powerful was not just the relationship. It was the courage it took to live it in front of an audience trained to expect a fairy tale ending with a groom. She did not just rewrite the rules. She showed that queer love deserves the same stage, the same music, the same camera angles. And next, we meet a singer who blended mystery, music, and identity into a message far louder than any interview ever could. For years, she wore tuxedos like armor and sang in metaphors that hinted, teased, and danced around the truth. But when Janelle Monáe finally dropped the mask in 2018, her message was crystal clear. I'm pansexual, and I live by my own rules. It was not just a statement, it was a declaration of radical self-love. Janelle's rise to stardom was anything but predictable. A genre-defying musician, sci-fi visionary, and red carpet disruptor, she built a universe where queerness, blackness, and womanhood could all coexist and thrive. Her music told stories most artists would not touch, and her image challenged everything from gender norms to industry polish. When she later came out as non-binary, it was less of a shift and more of a confirmation. She had always existed beyond the binary. Now she was simply naming it. More than a pop icon, Monáe is a cultural architect. She has never asked for approval, only space, and in claiming it, she has made room for millions more. Her legacy is not just about music or fashion, it is about liberation. And coming up next, we turn to a woman whose humor once made us laugh at awkward dates, until she surprised the world with a love story of her own. Nobody saw it coming. Not because she was hiding, but because she had always made her queerness feel like just another part of the story. When Abby Jacobson, co-creator and star of Broad City, announced her engagement to Olympic soccer player Jody Balfour, the internet reacted with surprise, and then with absolute joy. Known for playing hilariously awkward, messy characters, Abby brought a new kind of female voice to comedy. One that was imperfect, unapologetic, and wildly relatable. In real life, her journey was just as grounded. She quietly came out as bisexual in 2018, casually dropping the fact in interviews as if to say, "Yeah, this is me. Next question." That kind of low-key honesty became her signature. There was no big spectacle, just a consistent commitment to being herself, whether on screen or off. What makes Abby's story powerful is its normalcy. No headlines, no labels screaming for attention. Just two women, in love, planning a future together. And in a world that still sensationalizes queer relationships, her calm authenticity is revolutionary in its own way. Now, from down-to-earth comedy to Olympic grit, let us meet a woman whose journey from elite athletics to motherhood has made her a symbol of strength, both on and off the field. Not every coming-out story makes headlines. Some are quietly lived, and that is what makes them powerful. Claudia van den Heiligenberg, a decorated European athlete, never held a press conference or wrote a manifesto. She simply lived her truth, as a lesbian, as a partner, and eventually, as a mother. Claudia spent years building a reputation in sports, strong, disciplined, respected. But what earned her a different kind of admiration was her openness about her personal life. In 2018, she married her longtime partner, Lucy Vonkova, and in 2021, they announced they were expecting their first child. That one piece of news, a queer couple starting a family together, was a quiet victory for LGBTQ+ representation in athletics. No controversy, no drama, just love. Claudia's story proves that visibility is not always about grand gestures. Sometimes it is about showing up fully in your everyday life, at work, at home, in your community. She is not just a role model for queer athletes. She is a reminder that pride can look like peace, commitment, and choosing love every single day. And next, we shift from European calm to old Hollywood glam. with a woman whose fashion fame and queer truth collided in the most public way. One photo, one kiss, and suddenly, Catherine McNeil was no longer just a supermodel. She was a headline. In 2009, paparazzi snapped a now iconic image of her kissing fellow Australian star Ruby Rose. The internet exploded, but while the tabloids speculated, Catherine simply smiled and confirmed what others tried to sensationalize. Yes, I'm bisexual, always have been. By then, Catherine had already built a towering career. She had walked for Versace, fronted campaigns for D&G, and appeared on runways across the globe. But in an industry that thrives on image and illusion, her openness was rare and refreshing. Rather than brush the moment aside or let PR teams spin it,